Chapter 782. Mu Cheng held a circular kitchen knife in her hand. That kitchen knife's shape was really strange. It was a kitchen knife made of a light blue metal. It was round and hollow in the middle. Many strange patterns covered the surface of that kitchen knife. As the patterns flashed, that kitchen knife slowly spun, floating above Mu Cheng's palm. Instead of saying it was a kitchen knife, it was more like a light blue disc. It was like a precise machine, and the metal kept changing. This was Mu Cheng's kitchen knife, the famous knife of the Valley of Gluttony, the profound theory knife. It was mysterious and unique. It was a kind of kitchen knife that no one could imagine. This knife seemed to have surpassed the shape of a kitchen knife. It was just called a kitchen knife. Mu Cheng wore a neat chef robe. Her sharp eyes shot down from the second floor, clashing with Bu Fang's calm eyes. There was no tit-for-tat and there was no lightning. There was only a kind of calmness that filled the hearts of the two. The entire Phoenix Pavilion was crowded. Everyone was looking forward to this chef's challenge. That was because after Bu Fang's chef's challenge, more and more people felt that it was inconceivable. Did this little chef really want to use his power to sweep the entire Valley of Gluttony's top 10 chefs of the Tablet of Gluttony? Fortunately, this fellow had changed the rules of the chef's challenge. The loser would only be stripped of his kitchen knife. If the rule still existed, then Bu Fang would destroy the Valley of Gluttony's top 10 chefs of the Tablet of Gluttony. Moreover, Bu Fang was getting closer and closer to this goal. He was almost about to complete it. Come up. I've been waiting for a long time. Mu Cheng looked at Bu Fang, then smiled. In that instant, many people were captivated by her charming smile. Although Mu Cheng was only wearing a standard chef robe today, that neat chef robe made Mu Cheng's temperament even more mature, causing people to be even more intoxicated. When Mu Cheng opened her mouth, everyone quieted down, waiting for Bu Fang's reply. However, Bu Fang was silent for a while. Then, he replied with a single word, "Okay." Then, under the dumbfounded gazes of the crowd, he stepped into the air and walked to the second floor of the Phoenix Pavilion. Bu Fang's expression was very calm, and Bu Fang's emotions were very calm. However, it was precisely this calmness that made everyone feel a little unnatural. What happened to the promised chef's challenge? As soon as Bu Fang stepped onto the second floor of the Phoenix Pavilion, the atmosphere on the second floor immediately changed. There were very few people on the second floor. The bustling atmosphere on the first floor did not exist on the second floor. There were only a few people on the second floor. Chu Chongqing was wearing a long robe as he sat on the panel of judges. There were some familiar faces there. Lu Jelly was holding a book with a metal cover, reading it. Wenren Shang was holding a bamboo flask of wine, constantly pouring it into his mouth. The thick aroma of wine instantly filled the air. The sixth elder raised his mustache and stared at Bu Fang with sparkling eyes. The last judge was a man wearing a bamboo hat and carrying a fish basket on his back. His straw raincoat still had water stains that hadn't dried yet. Obviously, he had just been pulled back from outside. This person lifted his head, revealing a weather-beaten face with a smile on his face. This person was the angler of the Tablet of Gluttony, Zhou Cheng. He was a first-grade chef with a famous knife, the fish-bone knife. This kind of lineup of judges was really luxurious. At least, many people were convinced. The scene of the chef's challenge on the second floor was broadcasted to the first floor through a projection array. Everyone gathered in front of the array, watching with great interest. Everyone's face revealed a look of anticipation. Hades' era brought Yu and Xiao by. The few of them looked at the densely packed crowd, which was like a mountain, and blinked their eyes. A moment later, Hades' era brought Yu and Saint Daughter Zi Yun up to the second floor. Hua and Xiao Ye also went up to the second floor. Currently, in the Valley of Gluttony, these two girls could be said to be the devil incarnate. No one dared to provoke them. Except for Bu Fang, these two girls basically didn't care about anyone else. Who asked Xiao Ye to receive the Valley of Gluttony's inheritance? She was the next Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony. The space on the second floor wasn't small. However, with 2 stoves, the space seemed a little cramped. Bufang walked in front of his stove. It was a bronze stove, which was really exquisite and had all the functions one needed. When Bufang saw Mu Cheng's stove, his brows arched. This was because Mu Cheng's stove was truly shocking. She took out all sorts of tools and piled them up on the stove. These tools were really exquisite and they were all precise instruments. For example, there was a bronze box that was as tall as a person. When the box was opened, there were many exquisite crystal utensils. These utensils had very strange shapes, and ordinary people couldn't recognize them. Of course, Bufang didn't recognize them either, which was why he was so surprised. Cooking didn't just require a kitchen knife, a ball of flame, or a wok. Why would one need so many things? That would be a crooked way. Today's theme was soup, stewing soup. Mu Cheng and Bufang obviously came prepared. The two of them placed the ingredients that they had prepared on the stove. Bufang took out precious ingredients one by one. These ingredients were very precious, but they weren't expensive. This made many people slightly suspicious and surprised. Many people knew that Bufang had the Taotia's meat and Taotia's heart in his hands. These were the legendary top-grade ingredient. As long as these top-grade ingredients were taken out, Bufang's chances of winning would increase by 30%. However, something unexpected happened. Among the ingredients that Mu Cheng and Bufang took out, there weren't any high-grade ingredient. Although the grade was a bit lower than the Taotia's meat, it was still a divine soul realm cooking ingredient and was incomparably precious. To many people, it was a precious cooking ingredient. Mu Cheng washed her hands and rolled up her chef robe, revealing her fair and tender arms. Her gaze landed on Bufang, and a playful expression appeared on her face. "Owner Bu, what I'm best at is stewing soup. This is the dish that made me famous, and the reason why I became a special grade chef. I hope I won't let Owner Bu down today," Mu Cheng said. After speaking, the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. With a shout, the true energy in her hand surged into the light blue blade in her hand. With a clanging sound, the light blue blade flew up and combined together, turning into a kitchen knife. Theory saber, this was the true face of the theory saber. The kitchen knife spun, and a blade light flashed. Mu Cheng picked up a fat fish that was still releasing lightning bolt. She placed it on the chopping board, and the theory saber instantly slashed down on the fish's head. As it slashed down, the metal pieces on the theory saber flew out, gathering at the side of the theory saber. It made the theory saber look dazzling. 3 blades slashed down at the same time, and the fish was instantly disintegrated. Fish skin, fish scales, fish meat, fish bones, after sorting them out, they were all completely processed. This scene was projected through the projection array to the first floor. Everyone was silent. Was that a kitchen knife? It was so dazzling that it didn't make sense. This kitchen knife was simply made for cooking. After Mu Cheng calmly processed the fish meat, she indifferently looked at Bufang, who was cleaning the kitchen knife. Then, she took out a metal platform. That platform was very strange. There was a huge funnel at the top, and there was only a small opening at the bottom. True energy poured into that platform, and that ordinary platform instantly emitted a luster. In the next instant, Mu Cheng stuffed the processed fish meat into the funnel of that platform. Not only that, but she also stuffed the fish skin inside. Everyone was a little confused. What was Mu Cheng trying to do? Perhaps only Lu Jelly knew that Mu Cheng wanted to display her own advantages and style to the fullest. Buzz, a buzzing sound rang out. Mu Cheng took out a porcelain bowl filled with clear liquid and placed it under the funnel. That platform buzzed for a while. Then, a white spirit energy mist emerged. In the next moment, tiny pearl-like particles fell from the mist and filled half of the porcelain bowl, filling it to the brim with water. Those pearl-like particles were filled with energy, emitting a radiance. After being fished out by Mu Cheng pinched 2 of her fingers, squeezing a particle and shoving it into her mouth. Her brows slightly furrowed. These were all the essence of the fish meat and the fish skin. Relying on this precise platform, these essences were purified. Mu Cheng's cooking method obviously made Bufang a little surprised. However, he was only surprised. As a chef from Earth, Bufang had seen all kinds of strange cooking utensils, so he was already used to it. The dragon bone kitchen knife in his hand spun, fiercely picking up an ingredient. The knife light flashed. The meteor knife skill burst forth, and in an instant, that ingredient was completely processed. Bufang still chose the most basic cooking method. He was also good at this kind of basic cooking method. If he was asked to use those precise instruments, Bufang could learn it, but there was really no need for him to do so. The profound theory knife was very mysterious. The blade changed every time. However, when processing the ingredients, it was still so clean and nimble. The platform continued to rumble. Soon, all kinds of ingredients were turned into particles. These particles were the essence. After Mu Cheng tasted the granules one by one, she took out a porcelain bowl and mixed the granules together. She opened a bronze box, taking out a freezing instrument that emitted a cold aura. After placing the essence of the ingredients into the instrument, she froze it. In the next instant, Mu Cheng continued to cook the thick soup. This time, Mu Cheng's soup was mainly the meat of a divine soul realm spirit beast tiger. She washed the tiger meat clean and used the profound theory knife to cut it. She placed it into an orange-yellow clay pot, piling up a portion of spirit herbs that had been precisely cut by the profound theory knife. After that, she covered the pot and placed it on the fire to simmer. After doing all this, Mu Cheng finally had the mood to raise her head, watching Bufang cook. However, when she looked, her eyes involuntarily shrank, because she realized that at this moment, Bufang had actually pulled off the golden shrimp that was spitting bubbles on his shoulder, throwing it into the boiling black turtle constellation wok. With a plop, Xiaopi was thrown into the wok, happily swimming around. Bufang prepared a porcelain pot, placing the processed ingredients neatly into it. He also crushed the spirit herbs and scattered them inside. After a long time, Bufang took out the shrimp from the black turtle constellation wok. The steaming hot Xiaopi was spitting bubbles as it lay on Bufang's shoulder. Then, Bufang poured the soup that was overflowing with golden energy from the black turtle constellation wok into the porcelain pot. A golden red heaven and earth obsidian flame flew out, stewing the soup. Chapter 783. The Buddha jumps over the wall soup could be called the heavenly grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup. The soup that Bufang was stewing this time was the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. Not only were the ingredients edible, but the soup was also extremely delicious. It combined the taste and fragrance of many different ingredients, especially the ingredients that Bufang used this time. They were all high-grade divine soul realm ingredient. The meat of these ingredients was originally mixed with spirit energy, and after cooking, the spirit energy would seep into the soup from the ingredients. Moreover, this time, the soup was cooked using Xiaopi's stew, which emitted golden energy. Whether it was the taste or the fragrance, it was impeccable. At the very least, as the Buddha jumps over the wall soup gradually matured, the dense fragrance of the ingredients began to spread in the air. In the distance, Mu Cheng's cooking was also nearing its end. She scooped out the essence of the ingredients that had turned into granules. She accurately counted each granule to 100, then poured them evenly into the wok. The wok was boiling and steam was rolling. The soup constantly churned, and whistling sounds could be heard coming from the ingredient. As the granules were poured into the tiger meat soup, the tiger meat soup became even more violent and boiling. Bubbles constantly rose, then exploded. Gulp. Using an iron ladle, she scooped out the soup. The soup had a clear color, and it actually didn't contain any oil. It was quite mysterious. The dense meaty fragrance spread out, teasing the taste buds of the audience. Swish. She poured the clear tiger meat soup into a white porcelain bowl. Then, she took out a ladle of frozen essence granules and spread them on top of the soup. The essence granules of those ingredients sank into the bottom of the bowl, emitting bubbles. Gradually, they began to change the taste and color of the soup. Her hands spun. The profound theory knife clanged as it swung, as though it was changing shape. Soon, it became a metal disc that floated above Mu Cheng's palm. In the distance, Bu Fang had also finished the final step of cooking. Steaming hot air surged up, unceasingly surging and rumbling. With a shake of his hand, the porcelain pot was taken out by Bu Fang from the black turtle constellation Hua. On top of the porcelain jar, there was a Buddha-like lid with a smile on its face. There was light flickering on the lid, giving off a faint radiance. Water droplets flowed down from the Buddha's body, making the Buddha's color even more dazzling and enchanting. Bu Fang's Buddha jumps over the wall soup was also done. The atmosphere instantly became cold. With the completion of the dish, the chef's challenge was nearing its final stage. The judges shifted their gazes to the two of them. Mu Cheng was calm and magnanimous. At this moment, she was holding a clean white towel and meticulously wiping the plate, wiping away all the dust on the plate. In the end, the white towel pulled and Mu Cheng took a step back. Her breasts trembled and a satisfied expression appeared on her face. Her dish was finished. Under the projection array, everyone let out cries of surprise. That was because Mu Cheng's dish could only be described as beautiful and enchanting. Under the light, the dish was as resplendent as glass. The clear soup emitted an enchanting aroma, and the steam billowed, unceasingly spreading and rolling. After rolling on the ground, they scattered. The soup was clear and light blue in color. There were many ice crystal-like granules in it, and each granule emitted a misty luster under the light. It was very beautiful and enchanting. On the other hand, Bu Fang's Buddha jumps over the wall soup was not as attractive. After all, the lid was not opened, and the audience could not see the uniqueness of this dish. Mu Cheng carefully picked up the soup. Then, her figure swayed as she walked toward the judges' table. In a short while, she arrived in front of the judges and placed the clay pot in her hands on the center of the table. In front of each judge was a plate. The judges' gazes landed on the clay pot, and their eyes slightly lit up, revealing a look of anticipation. Mu Cheng's soup was very famous in the Valley of Gluttony. Ordinary people did not have many chances to taste Mu Cheng's soup. That was because, in the Phoenix Pavilion, Mu Cheng rarely cooked. Even if she did, she would not cook soup. Mu Cheng would only choose to cook soup when she was very serious. Because this was what she was best at. Even when she competed against Yan Yu for the first rank of the Tablet of Gluttony, Mu Cheng did not choose to cook soup. However, this time, in the chef's challenge against Bu Fang, Mu Cheng brought out her best dish. Mu Cheng's face was filled with a warm smile, making people feel as if they were bathing in the spring wind. She extended her slender jade-like hand, taking the porcelain bowl in front of Chu Chongqing. Then, she moved the spoon and the soup splashed. She scooped up a portion of the soup. The light blue soup was clear and emitted a rich aroma. A piece of trembling tiger meat was placed into the porcelain bowl. It was unknown if the essence of the ingredient was emitting hot or cold air, but it was sprinkled into the bowl, rolling on top of the tiger meat. A wave of meat fragrance spread out. "Great Elder! Please," Mu Cheng said with a smile. Mu Cheng said with a smile. The smile on her face made Chu Chongqing involuntarily nod his head. "Okay," Chu Chongqing said. Then, he picked up the spoon, scooping a spoonful of the clear soup into his mouth. Slurp. The soup in the spoon drilled into his mouth. This scene was transmitted to the first floor of the Phoenix Pavilion through the projection formation. There, many people were watching. Everyone widened their eyes, not daring to breathe loudly. They watched seriously, not knowing how the strict Chu Chongqing would judge this dish. Chu Chongqing took the first sip, and the look in his eyes changed. His sharp eyes softened after taking a sip of the soup. A moment later, he continuously scooped up the soup, pouring it into his mouth. Soon, Chu Chongqing put down the spoon, picked up the porcelain bowl, and poured the soup into his mouth. Gulp, gulp, gulp. His Adam's apple bobbed, and his eyes were filled with excitement. Swish, putting down the bowl, Chu Chongqing's face revealed a satisfied expression. It was too delicious, Chu Chongqing thought happily. A moment later, he picked up the porcelain spoon, scooping up the essence of the ingredient in the soup. Gulp, when the ingredient essence entered his mouth, it formed a sharp contrast with the boiling soup. These essences were frozen. When he put them in his mouth, the refreshing feeling made Chu Chongqing want to swallow his own tongue. How could it be so delicious? Swish! An explosion resounded. The clothes on Chu Chongqing's body were torn apart, revealing his strong muscles. Those muscles moved, slightly trembling. Delicious! Chu Chongqing's face was filled with excitement. He rubbed his beard, grinning. Mu Qing smiled at Chu Chongqing, nodding, then slightly bowing. Thank you, Great Elder, for your evaluation. Then, Mu Qing walked to the judges behind her. Meticulously and carefully, she scooped the soup into the porcelain bowl. Wenren Shang laughed heartily. He looked at Mu Qing with a playful expression. I didn't think that I would have the chance to eat the soup that Chef Mu Qing personally scooped. Even if I die, it's worth it. Mu Qing's soup was hard to drink, so it was natural that Wenren Shang was excited. Moreover, from Chu Chongqing's appearance, Mu Qing's soup lived up to its name. To be able to make Chu Chongqing's clothes explode so quickly, it meant that the taste and texture were top-notch. It seemed that this time, Bufang would meet a real opponent. In the distance, Bufang had already finished cooking. His gaze turned, falling on the judge's table. Bufang seemed to have met Wenren Shang's gaze, so he nodded. A moment later, he also picked up the Buddha jumps over the wall soup, walking toward the judge's table. The judges were happily drinking Mu Qing's soup, their faces brimming with excitement. Thud! A soft thud resounded. Bufang's Buddha jumps over the wall soup was placed on the table. Everyone was bewildered. Then, they put down their porcelain bowls. They all looked at Bufang with a playful look on their faces. Mu Qing's soup. How delicious was it? Perhaps only those who had tasted it would know. That soup had reached the pinnacle of control over the ingredients and taste. It had almost perfected the taste of the ingredient. Adding even a little more would make people feel bad. With the profound theory knife, a kitchen knife that could precisely control the ingredients, Mu Qing's dishes were that mesmerizing. Little brother Bufang, you should also drink a bowl of this sister's soup. Although we are having a chef's challenge, there is no need to make us look like enemies. Mu Qing smiled. She scooped up a bowl of soup and passed it to Bufang. Bufang was bewildered. He gave Mu Qing a deep look, then took it. However, Bufang was not in a hurry to drink it. Instead, he swept his gaze over the judges, then looked at Mu Qing. He calmly said, My dish, the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup, is done. After Bufang said that, he patted the lid of the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. The judges and Mu Qing's gazes were instantly attracted. There, thousands of resplendent rays of light burst out from the porcelain jar. Chapter 784. The dazzling light seemed to tear the sky apart as it shot out from the porcelain jar. It was so dazzling that many people's eyes were filled with disbelief. Bufang received the soup that Mu Qing handed him and opened the lid of the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. The light bloomed and the aroma filled the air. In an instant it had bewitched the taste buds of the judges. Mu Qing's eyes were filled with shock and she took a step back. Her chest violently heaved up and down as she stared at the porcelain jar of the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. The light seemed to hurt her eyes. It was really dazzling. This dish. Why would it release such a dazzling light? Why would it shine so brightly? Was this really a dish? The aroma was like a dragon as it drilled out of the porcelain jar. However, Bufang didn't care about it. He gently scooped the porcelain spoon, pouring the boiling soup that Mu Qing had handed him into his mouth. Sizzle! Bufang drank a small mouthful of the clear broth. The mellow taste and the ice-cold taste fused in his mouth, causing the pores on Bufang's body to slightly shrink. He had to admit that Mu Cheng's dish was really delicious. No wonder she was ranked second on the tablet of gluttony. This second dish didn't contain any water. This dish was almost perfect. The taste of each ingredient was utilized to the extreme by Mu Cheng. Moreover, she used a special method to fuse the flavors together and seep them into the soup. Moreover, there were many frozen ingredients that were filled with the essence of creativity. The moment those ingredients entered the mouth, they melted. There was no need to chew them. The ice-cold liquid instantly flowed down the tongue and into the mouth. It made people's minds relax. This was a dish that made people relax. Bufang thought in his heart. He really liked this dish, however. The corners of Bufang's mouth rose. After drinking the soup in the bowl, he gently exhaled. Unfortunately, Mu Cheng had met him. She had met the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup. It was the most difficult dish among all of Bufang's dishes. This was because every single detail of the Buddha jumps over the wall soup required Bufang to use his dense mental force to control it. Buddha jumps over the wall was already very tiring to cook. However, the ingredients used in this heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup were of a higher grade. When it was cooked, the flow of spirit energy between the ingredients became more turbulent and violent. Therefore, it was even more necessary for Bufang to use his mind power to comfort him. Fortunately, Bufang's mental energy had broken through the shackles and reached another realm. He had a better grasp of the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup. The heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup was cooked with the meat of a divine soul realm spirit beast. It was truly delicious and precious. Although Bufang's ingredients were slightly inferior to Mu Cheng's ingredients in terms of overall quality, with his culinary skills, this slight difference could be easily made up for. It's my turn. The corners of Bufang's mouth twitched. He placed the porcelain bowl on the table and gave Mu Cheng a meaningful look. Mu Cheng was still in shock. She was pulled back to reality by Bufang's words. What? Mu Cheng was confused. Bufang just waved his hand and took a long spoon. He picked up the blue and white porcelain bowl. Swish. He fished out the ingredients from the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. He placed some ingredients into each bowl. The reddish-brown soup poured out. It didn't have any oil, and it wasn't greasy at all. Thick energy was moving inside the soup. That kind of energy made people shudder in fear when they sensed it. What a terrifying energy! Mu Cheng could feel it clearly. Her eyes shrank and her body shivered. Bufang placed the Buddha jumps over the wall soup in front of the judges. The blue and white porcelain bowl was navy blue, and it had blue patterns carved on it. It was beautiful and fresh. Chu Changsheng gave Bufang a deep look. Then, his gaze shifted to the Buddha jumps over the wall soup, which was placed in front of him. When the Buddha jumps over the wall soup's lid was lifted, it released a strange phenomenon that excited him. His pores slightly shrank. Chu Changsheng couldn't help but bring his nose closer. The steam rose, hitting his nose, emitting a little bit of steam. Very fragrant. Very rich. Chu Changsheng squinted, stroking his beard. Lu Jelly picked up the blue and white porcelain bowl. His eyes were filled with seriousness and solemnity. He was carefully sizing it up, scrutinizing it from all angles without any blind spots. However, the more he looked, the more frightened he became. He lifted his head, looking at Bufang solemnly. He took a deep breath. This Bufang was worthy of being the dark horse chef who had defeated the chefs of the Valley of Gluttony in the Chef's Challenge. His creativity and mental energy were really incomparable, which made people exclaim in admiration. The exquisite part of the Buddha jumps over the wall soup was that it handled the taste, texture, and energy of each ingredient perfectly. It preserved the rich energy, and at the same time, the taste and texture of the ingredients were all wrapped in the soup. If Mu Cheng's soup and Bufang's soup were compared, there were some similarities, but there were also many differences. Bufang's Buddha jumps over the wall soup was more comprehensive. Mu Cheng's soup pursued perfection too much. However, there was no such thing as perfection in this world. The so-called perfection always had a flaw. Once that flaw was pierced by a sharp spear, it would completely collapse. And Bufang's Buddha jumps over the wall soup was actually that spear. Gulp. Gulp. Lu Jelly solemnly drank a mouthful of the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. After drinking a mouthful of soup, Lu Jelly's originally expressionless and solemn face underwent a huge change in an instant. His eyes abruptly widened, his hair began to float, and the clothes on his body began to flutter. This texture, this taste, this dish was enough to establish Bufang's qualification as a special grade chef. The taste, texture, and spirit energy of the ingredients had completely fused together, reaching the pinnacle of perfection. This was Bufang's soup? Lu Jelly took a deep breath. He calmed down, looking at Bufang with a serious expression. Was this fellow's specialty, cooking soup? He looked at Mu Cheng with a little pity. Encountering Bufang was really her bad luck. Mu Cheng's soup was also perfect. However, encountering Bufang's heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup, it seemed to have met its nemesis. Wah! Swish! An explosive sound rang out. Lu Jelly couldn't help but turn to look. Everybody turned to look at Chu Chongqing. There, Chu Chongqing's eyes were wide open, and the clothes he was wearing were torn apart again. Chu Chongqing's hair stood on end. His face was so red that it looked like it could drip blood. He was filled with excitement. He patted the table, standing up. Everyone cried out in surprise. His clothes exploded again. The great elder was conquered by a dish to the point that his clothes exploded. It's not easy at all. Looks like that soup is also very delicious. Elder Chu's reaction is a little intense. Clothes exploding? You guys, keep watching. It's not just clothes exploding. Through the projection formation, the diners were watching the judges' reactions. They were all surprised, and they started to discuss animatedly. Since Chu Chongqing's clothes could explode, they had concluded that only first-grade chefs could make the great elder's clothes explode. If they couldn't, at most, it would just be a piece of cloth. What? Delicious soup. Chu Chongqing laughed excitedly. He gulped down the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. With a loud thud, the blue and white porcelain bowl was smashed on the stove. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched and his face hurt. That was his favorite blue and white porcelain set. He couldn't let that old man break it like that. Swish! The sound of clothes tearing arose again. Everyone was stunned. They turned their heads to look at the great elder with their eyes wide open. There, Chu Chongqing was standing straight. Only strips of cloth were left hanging on his upper body, and the pants on his lower body had exploded. Only a pair of white underwear was left, covering Chu Chongqing's private parts. The great elder's F***king pants exploded? Not only did his clothes explode, but his pants also exploded. Everybody was silent for a while. Then, they exploded. No one had thought that the great elder's pants would explode. Wasn't clothes exploding the highest praise he had for food? Phew! Everybody exhaled deeply, trying to exhale the shock in their hearts. Mu Cheng gawked, dropping her jaw as she looked at Chu Chongqing. Her soup had only made Chu Chongqing's clothes explode, but Bufang's Buddha jumps over the wall soup had made both his clothes and pants explode. Without a doubt, Chu Chongqing's attitude had shown everything. Her dish was defeated. Lu Jelly was silent. Although he had a good relationship with Mu Cheng, he was a serious and fair person. Mu Cheng's soup wasn't bad, but Bufang's Buddha jumps over the wall soup was like a sharp spear, tearing a hole in Mu Cheng's perfect soup. When this hole was torn, the so-called perfection was torn into pieces. Mu Cheng had lost. At this moment, Wenren Shang had also finished drinking his Buddha jumps over the wall soup. His face was flushed, and his eyes were a little intoxicated. How could it be so delicious? The taste and texture of the ingredients had been perfectly combined. In just a blink of an eye, it could provoke people's enjoyment of food, making them completely fall into the trap that Bufang had created. It was really intoxicating. After the sixth elder finished drinking, he lay on his chair, not wanting to move. He only wanted to enjoy the rare moment after finishing his Buddha jumps over the wall soup. Fisherman Zhouqing was still slowly drinking his Buddha jumps over the wall soup. The more he drank, the more his brows furrowed. The pressure on his body also increased. Bufang's strength was really too strong. It was so strong that even Fisherman Zhouqing felt a little unconfident. If it was a chef's challenge, could he really win? He had no confidence at all. Just this Buddha jumps over the wall soup had crushed Zhouqing's confidence. The judge's silence and various attitudes were vividly displayed on the projection magic array. The result seemed to be self-evident. The entire Phoenix Pavilion was silent. No one had expected such an outcome. Everyone thought that Mu Cheng would definitely win. That was because Mu Cheng's soup should be invincible. However, who the hell was that Bufang? What the hell was that Buddha jumps over the wall soup? Why did it make Mu Cheng's soup lose its splendor? It even made the great elder's pants almost explode. The judges unanimously decided that the winner of this chef's challenge was Bufang. Mu Cheng's soup was really good, but Bufang's Buddha jumps over the wall soup was so good that it made people despair. Mu Cheng was scared out of her wits, her face filled with disbelief. She was really confident. She thought that she wouldn't lose because she had even used her specialty, stewing soup, in a chef's challenge. However, she had never thought that in the path of stewing soup she had still lost. Moreover, it was a crushing defeat. Why did she lose? Mu Cheng opened her eyes. There was a dazed look in her eyes as she looked at Bufang. Bufang looked at Mu Cheng, nodding his head. The ladle moved, and the sound of the soup shaking resounded. Bufang filled another bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall soup, casually tapping it. That blue and white porcelain bowl was supported by Bufang's mental force and true energy, slowly floating toward Mu Cheng. Mu Cheng's eyes were filled with tears. It was the sadness she felt from her defeat. In the end, it was the scalding Buddha jumps over the wall soup. Mu Cheng's eyes flashed with a dignified look. She had lost, and she admitted it. However, she also wanted to know, how did she lose? Gulp, gulp, gulp. Holding the blue and white porcelain bowl, her red lips parted as she poured the soup into her mouth. Chapter 785. Gulp, gulp, gulp. Mu Cheng's red lips slightly parted, touching the edge of the porcelain bowl, which had become a little hot because of the soup. That slightly hot feeling made Mu Cheng's nostrils involuntarily exhale a heavy breath. The reddish-brown soup of the Buddha jumps over the wall soup rolled down Mu Cheng's lips, entering her mouth and gradually flowing down her throat. The rich fragrance instantly bloomed in her mouth. The taste of the soup, which had been brought out to its peak, made Mu Cheng's entire body stiffen. Her eyes were filled with disbelief. This broth was different from the meat broth that she had meticulously cooked. Every step of this broth was meticulous and strict. The taste of every ingredient in this Buddha jumps over the wall soup was different. There were dozens of ingredients, and Mu Cheng could taste every single one of them. However, it was hard for her to imagine that when these completely different tastes were mixed together, it could actually give her taste buds such a pleasant experience. That kind of taste stimulated the taste buds, teasing the taste bud. It was completely irresistible. As Mu Cheng drank, her eyes narrowed. Her breathing became heavier and heavier, and 2 blushes appeared on her delicate and fair face. So delicious, Mu Cheng muttered inwardly. The stimulation on her tongue made her body tremble involuntarily. She couldn't help but tremble, as though she was having a spasm. She stood at her spot, and her legs involuntarily tightened. She placed the porcelain bowl down, her face complicated as she looked at Bufang. She admitted defeat. Whether it was the taste or the taste, she had lost. The Buddha jumps over the wall soup had so many flavors. With dozens of ingredients mixed together, it could still give people such a refreshing taste. Besides Bufang, perhaps no one else could do it. Inside the projection magic array, everyone saw the expressions on the judges' faces. The entire place became silent, and they especially looked at Mu Cheng's expression after she drank Bufang's Buddha jumps over the wall soup. His expression caused their hearts to sink. They knew that Mu Cheng really didn't have a chance. It seemed like Bufang had really won. In the end, there was no suspense. Mu Cheng also stopped struggling. She knew that she had already lost. Bufang took a step back and took off the velvet rope that tied his hair. His hair immediately fell loose. Chu Chongqing took out a set of clothes from his spatial ring. After putting them on, he calmly looked at Bufang. When he came to be a judge, Chu Chongqing had always brought several sets of clothes. However, he didn't expect that his pants would explode this time. Therefore, he did not put any pants in the spatial ring at all. The space in a spatial ring was very precious, and it would be a waste of space to store extra things. Chu Chongqing always had the habit of tidying up his spatial ring. Chu Chongqing didn't have any pants, so he could only wear a shirt. His underwear swayed slightly in the wind. There was a slight coolness in his balls. In that case, let's announce the winner of this chef's challenge now, Chu Chongqing said solemnly. However, with that set of clothes, no matter how you looked at it, he didn't look proper. Originally, many people were attracted by this chef's challenge. But now, when Chu Chongqing announced the result, everyone's attention was drawn to him. Finally, he announced that Bufang was the winner of this chef's challenge. There was no cheering or applause. Everybody just quietly watched the final result. Even Goddess Mu Cheng was defeated. Everybody's face was a little sorrowful. The top 10 chefs of the Tablet of Gluttony were almost swept away. Who could stop Bufang's footsteps? Would the top 10 chefs of the Tablet of Gluttony be swept away? To the Valley of Gluttony it was a great humiliation. The Valley of Gluttony had so many talents. So many excellent chefs had been swept away by a young man. Crack! Crack! All of a sudden, everybody held their breaths. They couldn't believe their eyes as they looked at the projection formation. Within the array, they saw the profound theory knife floating in Mu Cheng's hand. That kitchen knife had turned into a disc and was spinning in Mu Cheng's palm. As it spun, the knife also changed its shape. Each shape looked really cool. It was the profound theory knife, which looked like it was full of mechanisms. Under Bufang's feet, the light of the formation sparkled. A moment later, a sparkling crystal knife cabinet floated in the middle of the formation. Bufang raised his hand, holding the knife. With a wave of his hand, Mu Cheng's profound theory knife flew into Bufang's hand. Bufang held the profound theory knife in his hand. He couldn't help but feel the magical features of the knife. As soon as his mind flickered, the profound theory knife made a clanging sound. The round disc spun, and the blade inside the knife was faintly discernible, turning into a knife. It was really interesting. Bufang played with it for a while, then put the profound theory knife into the knife cabinet. There were many kitchen knives in the knife cabinet. Any one of these knives would cause a huge uproar in the Valley of Gluttony. However, so many kitchen knives could only stay in the knife cabinet, gathering dust. Many people felt their hearts ache when they saw it. After putting away the kitchen knives, Bufang strode away. The chef's challenge hadn't ended, and the temporary task hadn't been completed. Bufang didn't have any reason to relax. Bufang walked down from the second floor. Instantly, everyone's gazes landed on Bufang. Looking at Bufang, their faces revealed a complicated expression. They were incomparably shocked. This fellow actually defeated the owner of the Phoenix Pavilion, Goddess Mu Cheng. Bufang was very calm. He didn't care about the gazes of the crowd. He was someone who didn't care about the crowd's gazes. He waved his hand, and the crowd made way for him. Bufang slowly walked out of the Phoenix Pavilion. Behind Bufang was the tall and beautiful netherworld woman Yu, and a white iron puppet. Xiaoya and Hua were holding hands, following behind Bufang. The corners of Chu Chongqing's mouth twitched. However, he couldn't do anything. He could only watch as Xiao Ye, the future Valley Master, followed behind Bufang. The atmosphere in the Phoenix Pavilion became a little awkward. Many people stopped talking, looking at each other. They didn't know what to say. Chu Chongsheng and the others also left. This chef's challenge had ended, but Bufang's chef's challenge hadn't ended yet. No one knew who Bufang would challenge in the next chef's challenge. The crowd could only watch the chefs leave the Phoenix Pavilion one after another. Although Mu Cheng was a little disappointed and regretful that the profound theory knife was taken away, she wasn't really sad. She knew that being sad was useless. What she needed was action. In the future chef's challenge against Bufang, she needed to defeat Bufang and take back the profound theory knife. That was what she wanted in her heart. Time ticked by slowly. The Valley of Gluttony had 100 things to do. After several days of repair, it had slowly recovered. The entire Valley of Gluttony seemed to be full of vitality. Everyone's face was brimming with excitement. This excitement wasn't because the Valley of Gluttony had finished repairing. It was because of one person. A person who was about to create a miracle. A chef who had challenged the top 10 chefs of the Tablet of Gluttony. Today, he had challenged 9 chefs and won all of them. This made the entire Valley of Gluttony burst into an uproar. No one had ever thought that such a dreamlike event could happen. It was a chef's challenge. Each chef's challenge consumed a lot of energy. However, this person had almost defeated the top 10 chefs of the Tablet of Gluttony in just a few days. Today, there was only one special grade chef left. Lu Jelly hadn't had a chef's challenge yet. If Lu Jelly lost, it meant that Bufang had swept the entire Valley of Gluttony. If there was something that could represent the chefs of the Valley of Gluttony, it would be the top 10 chefs of the Tablet of Gluttony. If they couldn't represent the top 10 chefs of the Tablet of Gluttony, who else could? In these days, something grand had happened in the Valley of Gluttony. The Valley of Gluttony had chosen a new Valley Master. It had been almost 10 years since the previous Valley Master had disappeared. The Valley of Gluttony had been declining. It had never risen or improved. Without a Valley Master, it meant that it had no backbone. The entire Valley of Gluttony couldn't recover from this setback. Although Chu Chongsheng was the great elder, he wasn't the Valley Master. There were many things he couldn't decide. He couldn't lead the Valley of Gluttony to recover. This time, the new Valley Master had stirred up many people. Perhaps it was one of the reasons why the Valley of Gluttony was full of vitality. Of course, this time, the Valley Master was just a 10-year-old little girl. However, the Valley of Gluttony had a new Valley Master. However, what gave people a headache and made them not know whether to laugh or cry was that their new Valley Master seemed to like going to a new restaurant. Even the great elder Chu Chongsheng couldn't stop her. Because that new restaurant wasn't opened by someone else. It was the young chef who had swept the top 10 chefs of the Tablet of Gluttony. Everybody was curious. Although that restaurant hadn't opened yet, this gimmick had attracted many people's attention. Of course, people were more interested in the chef's challenge between Bufang and Lu Jelly. On the long street of the Valley of Gluttony, several miles away from the Glutton Gods building, a restaurant with its tightly shut doors was slowly pushed open. A slender and thin figure strode out of the restaurant. Bufang was wearing the vermilion robe. He rolled up his sleeves, revealing his white, slender arms. Bufang exhaled gently. He turned around, taking several steps back to look at the new restaurant. Fong Fong's Little Restaurant, a branch of the Valley of Gluttony, has been renovated. Host, please name it. After you have finished the last chef's challenge, you can open for business. If you have more than 1,000 customers on the first day, you will receive an extra reward from the system. Bufang crossed his arms in front of his chest, assessing the Taotai restaurant that the system had just renovated. Instantly, the system's serious voice echoed in his head. A moment later, Bufang exhaled gently. His eyes showed a gleam of anticipation and excitement. More than 1,000 customers on the first day. It seems challenging. I'm looking forward to it. The corners of Bu Fang's mouth rose as he mumbled. A gust of wind blew, making the vermilion robe flutter on his body. If it's in the Valley of Gluttony, the new branch will be called Taotai Restaurant. Chapter 786. Taotai Restaurant. It was the name of this branch in the Valley of Gluttony. Bu Fang was too lazy to think about it. Anyway, no restaurant in the entire Valley of Gluttony dared to use Taotai as its name. The others didn't dare, but Bu Fang did. Rubbing the two black and white Taotai bandages on his hands, the corners of Bu Fang's mouth rose, revealing a playful smile. He still had two Taotais on his hand. Who would dare to challenge him if he used Taotia's name? Clasping his hands, the vermilion robe fluttered in the breeze. Sunlight shone down from the sky and shone on Bu Fang's body, making him feel warm and comfortable. As time flew, the temperature dropped a little. Autumn was about to pass, and winter was about to come. The dampness in the air would occasionally be mixed with withered leaves. Bu Fang looked at the Taotai restaurant, rubbing his chin. Gradually, his eyes showed that he was pondering. It was not an easy task to reach 1,000 customers on the first day of business. Bu Fang thought that he had to find a way to make the Taotai restaurant famous. As for what method to use, Bu Fang didn't know yet. However, Bu Fang guessed that since he had swept the top 10 chefs of the Tablet of Gluttony, he could attract a lot of customers. Rubbing his hair, Bu Fang was too lazy to think about this problem. He turned around and walked to the restaurant. He wanted to experience the newly renovated restaurant. His restaurant was several miles away from the Gluttony Gods building. It was in the middle of the long street of the Gluttony God City. There were many restaurants and inns around him. The Phoenix Pavilion wasn't far from the Taotai restaurant. Sometimes, when Bu Fang basked in the sun at the entrance, he could see Mu Qing leaning on the roof of the Phoenix Pavilion, smiling at him. Not far from him was Wenren Shang's restaurant, which wasn't famous. His restaurant was casual, and because of that, the customers were also casual. Of course, compared to the Phoenix Pavilion, the flow of customers was much smaller. However, there were still some loyal customers. No matter what, Wenren Shang was a top chef on the Tablet of Gluttony. There were many familiar faces around, and Bu Fang knew all of them. It was very competitive to open a restaurant in such an atmosphere. This was also the difficult problem that the system had given him. Perhaps the opening of Bu Fang's restaurant would be very popular, but it would not be easy to make a name for himself in the long street where there were so many powerful restaurants. On this street, each restaurant had its specialty dishes, and each restaurant was owned by a chef on the Tablet of Gluttony. It was not difficult for Bu Fang to get the shop. After all, he had helped the Valley of Gluttony a lot. Of course, Chu Chongqing wouldn't reject him if he wanted a shop. Fortunately, Yen Yu was a special grade chef, so he owned many shops in the Glutton God City. Bu Fang's shop was one of Yen Yu's. After occupying this shop, Bu Fang started to open another branch. He returned to the restaurant. As soon as he entered the restaurant, he was greeted by a familiar aura. Everything was decorated in the same style as Fang Fang's little store. The Cloud Mist restaurant was also decorated in the same style as Fang Fang's little store. Perhaps it was the system's style. It was simple and refreshing, and it was not complicated at all. Bu Fang's face revealed a satisfied expression. His own restaurant was the most comfortable. Reaching out his hand, Bu Fang's slender fingers caressed the surface of the clean and spotless table. The moment his fingertips touched the surface, the corners of Bu Fang's mouth twitched. Far from him, a path understanding tree was swaying. This path understanding tree seemed to be a copy of the Cloud Mist restaurant's path understanding tree. As the path understanding tree swayed, thick spirit energy gushed out. Its power was really terrifying. 8 lines had already appeared on the path understanding tree. The entire tree seemed to have gained sentience. As it swayed, a unique path understanding energy spread out, causing one's mind to feel calm and tranquil. Under the path understanding tree, a pitch-black dog was snoring away. When it snored, the wind blew, causing the leaves of the path understanding tree to gently sway. Next to the black dog was an ancient, pitch-black netherworld ship. That netherworld ship was quietly parked there, as if it had been there since ancient times. It was still the same familiar recipe, and it was still the same familiar smell. The decorations of the restaurant were still as familiar as before. Bufang exhaled contentedly. He pulled a chair and curled up in front of the restaurant. He squinted his eyes, leisurely watching the people coming and going in front of the door, as well as the flowers blooming and wilting. In the distance, two small figures dashed over. Bufang's squinted eyes slightly opened, looking in that direction, and the corners of his mouth twitched. Because the two people who came were none other than the two girls, Xiao Ye and Xiao Hua. After Bufang saw the two of them, he lightly snorted, then continued to squint his eyes. He was thinking about what dish he would cook for the last chef's challenge, as well as how to make the restaurant reach 1,000 customers on its first day of business. Xiao Ye and Hua came to the front of the restaurant, already familiar with the place. Xiao Ye eagerly pulled a chair and placed it beside Bufang. Sitting on it, she copied Bufang's posture, spreading her legs and squinting her eyes to rest. Hua, who was also the seven-colored sky-devouring python, ran to Lord Go's side. She crossed her legs, sat beside the chubby Lord Go, squinted her eyes, and sniffed her nose as if she was enjoying it. Yu poked her head out of the netherworld ship, glancing at Hua, who was leaning against Lord Go's side. A strange expression suddenly appeared on her cold face, then she yawned and went back to sleep in the netherworld ship. Hades' Era was wearing a long robe, sneakily running from afar. When he saw Bufang, who was curled up in front of the door, his eyes instantly lit up, then he sped up, dashing in front of Bufang. Bufang, young man, where's the spicy strip we agreed on? Hades' Era looked around cautiously, then asked Bufang. Bufang's nostrils flared, and his squinted eyes opened a thin slit. He turned his head to look at Hades' Era, then said calmly, spicy strip? Wait until the restaurant's renovations are done. Isn't the restaurant renovated? Hades' Era widened his eyes, pointing at the restaurant. The kitchen has just been renovated, so let it cool down. Isn't it just spicy strips? Young people should relax, Bufang yawned, then said. In the distance, a purple figure appeared. Her purple hair fluttered in the wind. Brother Ha! I finally found you. Why are you hiding from Ziyun? Saint Daughter Ziyun dashed out of the alley, turning her head to see Hades' Era in the distance. Instantly, her face lit up with excitement. She swung her arms, then dashed toward him. Oh my, youngsters nowadays are really scary. Hades' Era saw Saint Daughter Ziyun dashing toward him, as if she wanted to go crazy with him to the ends of the earth. Hades' Era's face instantly changed. Bufang, young man, we have a deal. Tomorrow, when I come again, you must prepare spicy strips for I. Anyway, youngsters nowadays are too ferocious. Hades told Bufang seriously. Then, he turned around, dashing away. Shortly after, he disappeared. Ziyun passed by Bufang. Seeing Bufang taking a nap, she squinted and smiled. Hello, Owner Bu, said Ziyun. Bufang nodded. Then, he saw Ziyun calling him Brother Ha, dashing away. The corners of Bufang's mouth twitched. Youngsters nowadays. Outside the Valley of Gluttony, a team of more than 10 people appeared. They jumped off a spirit boat, landing in front of the Valley of Gluttony. The leader of this team was a man carrying a long black bow on his back. His eyes were so fierce. This man had so many spirit talismans on his body, which had immense energy diffusing from them. The Valley of Gluttony. It's a dangerous place. A hint of coldness appeared in the eyes of the man with the longbow on his back. Then, he let out a long sigh. The Valley of Gluttony's inheritance had spread all over the hidden dragon royal court. Some people even knew that Emol Yuji of the heavenly secret Holy Land was in this Valley of Gluttony. The three almighty experts of the wavering light Holy Land had died tragically in this place. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that this place was a dangerous place. No one knew why Emolyoji hadn't left yet. The Valley of Gluttony's inheritance had been taken away, and there was nothing in the Valley of Gluttony that could attract people anymore. Many experts of the Holy Lands had left, but Emolyoji still stayed in the Valley of Gluttony. Did he have some unspeakable secret? The man carrying the long black bow squinted. He exhaled a wisp of white air, which meandered like a dragon. However, Yen Qing didn't come here for Emolyoji. His real purpose was to ask the holy saint of the ancient Jade Holy Land to investigate the cause of Yen Yu's death and the netherworld creature that had killed the holy saint's clone. The holy saint had told him that he was only here to investigate. However, Yen Qing was Yen Yu's brother. How could he just investigate? You killed the Yen family's people. Of course, you have to pay with your blood. It's just the Valley of Gluttony. They don't even have a half-step creature. How could they stop us? Yen Qing took the long black bow from his back. His eyes were sharp as if he wanted to tear the void. Then, a group of people slowly entered the Valley of Gluttony. Chapter 787. The Phoenix Pavilion was bustling and lively as usual. Although Mu Qing had lost to Bufang in the Chef's Challenge, it did not affect the Phoenix Pavilion's business too much. Of course, there was still a slight impact. However, this impact was not a big deal to the Phoenix Pavilion. Mu Qing, on the other hand, was happy to be free. However, without the profound theory knife, she had lost some of the joy of cooking. However, after her defeat in the Chef's Challenge, she began to find her own shortcomings. No matter what, she wanted to defeat Bufang in the future and win back the profound theory knife. Hence, she had changed her previous precise control over the ingredient. She began to care about the spirit energy and the taste of the ingredient. This was a long process. However, Mu Qing had a tongue that even Bufang envied. Hence, it was not difficult for her to learn. As of today, Mu Qing was no longer in charge of the Phoenix Pavilion's cooking. Every day she practiced her cooking skills. When she was tired, she would lean on the second floor of the Phoenix Pavilion and look down through the window. Over there would always be a lazy figure curled up on a chair, resting. The warm sunlight shone on that figure's face, shining on his not-so-handsome face. It was as if it had some magic that attracted Mu Qing's gaze, making her lower jaw rest on the windowsill. She was in a daze. Special Chef Mu. Special Chef Lu sent a letter asking for you. Just as Mu Qing was leaning on the windowsill in a daze, suddenly, a sound came from behind her. Mu Qing was a little bewildered. Turning her head, she saw the restaurant's guard handing her a jade talisman. Mu Qing stood up from the windowsill. Her voluptuous body slightly swayed, and her voluptuous breasts rose and fell. Stretching her body, a soft and tender sound came from the tip of her nose. Her appearance was a feast for the eyes, and the guard's eyes were glued to her. Receiving the jade talisman, his consciousness sank into the jade talisman. Then, he finished reading the contents of the jade talisman. Mu Qing's eyes brightened. Tomorrow was the Chef's Challenge between Lu Jieli and Bufang? Lu Jieli was inviting her over to discuss the dishes for tomorrow's Chef's Challenge. The theme of tomorrow's Chef's Challenge was medicinal cuisine. Medicinal cuisine was one of Lu Jieli's specialties. If one were to ask who was the most knowledgeable in the Valley of Gluttony, it would be Lu Jieli. Lu Jieli wasn't a talented chef, but no one in the Valley of Gluttony could compare to his hard work. The books in Lu Jieli's house could be compared to the entire Valley of Gluttony. The books in his house covered many aspects, including astronomy and geography. Most of it was related to the study of elixirs. As for elixir cuisine, Lu Jieli could be said to have studied it very thoroughly. However, Lu Jieli always told Mu Qing that his knowledge was still not enough. His goal was to one day travel the entire hidden dragon continent and record all the medicinal ingredients in the world, thoroughly researching them. Only then would he be able to cook the most perfect elixir cuisine in the entire continent. This was his dream. Mu Qing admired Lu Jelly a lot. Every time she saw Lu Jelly working hard to absorb knowledge, she would feel a sense of guilt from the bottom of her heart. She, Mu Qing, was a talented chef. The so-called talented chef meant that she could easily do things that others had worked hard for a long time. She could not understand the hardships of other people's hard work and sweat. However, she really liked the feeling of working hard. After leaving the Phoenix Pavilion, Mu Qing put on a coat. The coat had a slit, revealing her slender, white, and beautiful legs. She walked past the Taotai restaurant and saw Bufang, who was lying on a chair and basking in the sun. The corners of her mouth curved into a smile. Then, she turned her head, facing the sun as she walked toward Lu Jelly's restaurant. A gust of wind blew past, causing her hair to become a little messy. Although Bufang's appearance had almost overturned the top 10 chefs of the Tablet of Gluttony, Mu Qing thought that it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. The top 10 chefs of the Valley of Gluttony had been quiet for too long. They needed a little stimulation, and Bufang was exactly that stimulation. This stimulation brought good things, filling the entire Valley of Gluttony with vitality. This was a good sign. The great elder, Chu Chongqing, must have seen this good sign. Otherwise, with the great elder's bad temper, Bufang had directly destroyed the top 10 chefs of the Tablet of Gluttony. It was already good enough that the old man did not expel Bufang. He even gave Bufang a storefront, allowing him to open a restaurant in the Valley of Gluttony. Mu Qing walked against the wind. All of a sudden, a small team came from afar. Why was it a small team? It was because the other party's formation was too orderly. It was even more orderly than the Valley of Gluttony's guards. The leader was a handsome man. Looking at that man, Mu Qing's eyes slightly shrank, because she realized that this man seemed to be similar to the dead Yen Yu. Yen Yu? That's right. Yen Yu. It was said that Yen Yu was a disciple of a big family in the ancient Jade Holy Land. Even the Holy Saint of the Holy Land had sent a clone to save Yen Yu. However, in the end, the Holy Saint's clone was shattered by Nether King Ha's palm. Yen Yu was also killed by Chu Chongqing. It could be said that Yen Yu was the special grade chef with the most tragic death in history. According to the Holy Land's character, they would definitely send experts to investigate the cause of Yen Yu's death. The cause of Yen Yu's death was related to Great Elder and that Hades era, who was also Bufang's men. It might implicate Great Elder and Bufang. At that time, when the Holy Land put the blame on them, Grand Elder and Bufang would definitely not have a good ending. Mu Qing frowned. She felt that she needed to do something. She originally wanted to go up and fool that expert. However, when he saw that handsome expert with a dark face and that terrifying aura that prevented strangers from getting close to him, she blinked her eyes, ran her fingers through her hair, and let out a hollow laugh. She turned around and headed back the way she came, intending to escape from this position. As an almighty existence at the half-step divine soul realm, Yen Qing naturally saw through Mu Qing's guilty conscience. Realizing that Mu Qing was planning to escape, a playful smile involuntarily appeared on his dark face. "You too, go catch that woman," Yen Qing ordered. The two guards behind him nodded. A moment later, they took a deep breath, raised their feet, and stomped on the ground. Boom! The ground rumbled. A moment later, the two of them shot out like arrows. Their speed was so fast that people couldn't see them. Like a wild, savage beast, it instantly charged towards Mu Qing, who had just turned around. As soon as Mu Qing turned around, she felt a terrifying aura assaulting her. Mu Qing's body stiffened. Her exquisite face still wore a hollow smile. What the heck? This lady just turned around. What do they want? Don't bully this beautiful and young lady. These were two guards. Their auras were condensed, and they were actually divine soul realm experts. Their cultivation was extremely terrifying, and they weren't any weaker than Mu Cheng. Mu Cheng was frightened. As a special chef of the Valley of Gluttony, her cultivation base was really strong. She had reached the divine soul realm with a 3-step soul ladder. However, even with her cultivation base, she was a little scared facing these guards. "Big sister, our Commander Yin wants to see you. Please come with us," said one of the guards with a gentle voice. When Mu Cheng heard that, she wasn't happy. She placed her hands on her hips, shouting at the guard's nose. "Who are you calling big sister? Who are you calling? Do you think I'm that old? If you don't apologize to me today, I won't King leave this place." Mu Cheng was enraged. She crossed her arms in front of her chest, causing her chest to bulge. Then, she sat on the ground. The guard who had just spoken was bewildered. The other guard revealed a sneer on his face. His hand flipped, and a simplified version of the ancient jade lock appeared in his hand. He crushed it. Lightning bolts shot out from the ancient jade lock, falling on Mu Cheng's body in just a blink of an eye. Mu Cheng's face changed. "You young man, what do you want? If you do that again, I'm going to scream." Mu Cheng screamed. "I told you that Commander Yin wants to see you. Don't cause trouble." The guard impatiently shook the ancient jade lock in his hand. Instantly, the lightning bolts touched Mu Cheng's body. A numb feeling entered Mu Cheng's body in just a blink of an eye, numbing her entire body. Mu Cheng really wanted to sit on the ground and not move. However, the numb feeling from the ancient jade lock forced her to move. If she didn't move, being electrocuted would be so painful that she would cry. Thus, Mu Cheng was brought to Yen Cheng. Yen Cheng's face was incomparably handsome. His face looked like it was carved by a knife, and his eyes were like stars. His eyes fell on Mu Cheng, who was tied up by the ancient jade lock. "You guys are too rude. How could you treat such a beautiful girl like that? If I'm not wrong, you should be the only woman in the top 10 of the Tablet of Gluttony in the Valley of Gluttony." Profound theory knife. Mu Cheng. Mu Cheng furrowed her brows. The eyes of the man in front of her were too invasive. "You're wrong. I'm not profound theory knife Mu Cheng." Mu Cheng looked at Yen Cheng seriously. "I'm not?" Yen Cheng narrowed his eyes, a devilish smile hanging on the corners of his mouth. He reached out his hand, his fingers slightly curving as they brushed past Mu Cheng's smooth cheek. Then, he suddenly pinched Mu Cheng's chin. "I'm not stupid. How could I not recognize the famous profound theory knife Mu Cheng? Oh, I forgot to tell you that Yen Yu is my little brother. I'm Yen Cheng from the ancient Jade Holy Lands Yen family." Chapter 788. Mu Cheng's chin was grabbed by a strong hand. The ancient jade lock emitted lightning bolts, entangling her body. It made her feel a little numb. The Yen family of the ancient Jade Holy Land was Yen Yu's family? Yen Yu's tragic death in the Valley of Gluttony had attracted the attention of the big families in the Holy Lands. Those families had thousands or even tens of thousands of years of history. Mu Cheng thought that she shouldn't expose the Great Elder. Otherwise, the Valley of Gluttony, which had just settled down, would become turbulent again. Thus, Mu Cheng revealed a forced smile on her face. "Oh, it's the great commander of the Yen family of the ancient Jade Holy Land. It's an honor to meet you. You're the great commander. Why do you have to trouble a weak girl like me?" Mu Cheng smiled as her mouth was pinched. Yen Cheng smiled evilly. He didn't mind Mu Cheng's words at all. Weak girl? She was a special grade chef ranked second on the Tablet of Gluttony. No matter if it was her cultivation base or talent, she was a top-notch existence in the entire Valley of Gluttony. She was a weak girl? Profound theory knife Mu Cheng. Did she think that Yen Cheng was a fool? "You should tell me who killed my brother. And where is the netherworld creature that destroyed the Holy Saint's clone?" Yen Cheng's hand grabbed Mu Cheng's chin, and the sound of bones cracking arose. Mu Cheng was in so much pain that tears rolled down her cheeks. "This guy better not fall into my hands." Otherwise, I'll let him know why the flowers are always so red. The Yen family's people were all bad people. Yen Cheng's face was so cold, and his body emitted a murderous aura. That terrifying aura almost suffocated Mu Qing. If Yen Qing hadn't suppressed half of his aura to avoid alerting the enemy, his aura would have shot up to the sky like a tornado. An existence at the half-step divine spirit realm was almost invincible in a place like the Valley of Gluttony. Yen Qing could have acted recklessly. However, since the Holy Saint's clone was destroyed here, Yen Yu had to be more cautious. The Holy Saint had many clones. Although they weren't strong, they weren't much weaker than Yen Qing. It was because the Holy Saint's real body was too strong, and his clones were also stronger. The Holy Saint's clone was destroyed, which meant that the netherworld existence hidden in the Valley of Gluttony had the power to kill him. Hence, he had to be careful. First, he had to do a thorough investigation. "Unlock this ancient jade lock for me." "I'll tell you," said Mu Qing as she glared at Yen Qing. If glares could eat people, then Yen Qing would have been devoured so badly that not even his bones were left. Yen Qing didn't hesitate. With a snap of his fingers, the ancient jade lock was unlocked. When the ancient jade lock was unlocked, Mu Qing felt as if she could see the sun again. Her breathing became smoother. "Can you tell me now?" Yen Qing pinched Mu Qing's chin. In the next moment, he extended his other hand and caressed Mu Qing's face. Mu Qing glared at him. Her red lips parted slightly. The next moment, with a wave of her hand, a huge black shadow appeared from her space ring. The appearance of that enormous body gave everyone a fright. Yen Qing's body stiffened, and the hand that was pinching Mu Qing's chin loosened. Mu Qing's eyes were cold. The other didn't come with good intentions. If so, she didn't need to stay and say anything. Running away was the most important thing. Its huge body was sticky and stained with sticky and smelly mucus. Yen Qing was careless, and the sticky liquid stuck to him. Instantly, his face changed. His handsome face twisted. "Damn it! What the hell is that thing?" Yen Qing was enraged. His palm glowed, turning into a sharp claw that furiously swiped at that giant body. With a bang, the huge body was crushed by his claw. Flesh and blood flew everywhere. The black blood and the black stench almost covered the entire sky. It was as if a huge bomb had exploded. Yen Qing, who bore the brunt, was petrified at his spot. He didn't want to live anymore. Although his body was wriggling, a thin layer of true energy had fallen off and expelled the filth from his body. However, if one looked closely, they would see that Yen Qing's eyes were bloodshot at this moment. He was King tricked by that woman. "Go after her. Go after her. When you catch that woman, break her legs and pull out her tendons." Yen Qing was enraged. He shouted at the guards next to him. The guards beside him didn't look much better than Yen Yu. They simply didn't expect that such a huge thing would actually spray out such filth and stench when it was crushed. At this moment, they felt that even their breaths were stinky. "That's a divine soul realm spirit beast with a 5-step soul ladder. Deep sea smelly sheetfish." Yen Cheng's face was cold, his mouth shivering. The deep sea smelly sheetfish was also known as the stink bomb. It was a disgusting thing that could kill people. That woman carried such a disgusting thing with her. What a waste of that woman's beautiful body. The two guards pulled themselves together. They wiped the stench off their bodies. A moment later, the tips of their feet touched the ground, and their bodies shot out like a rocket. Their speed was really fast. They dashed in the direction Mu Qing had left. Mu Qing ran as fast as she could. She had taken off her coat. Her ample breasts bounced up and down as she ran, which was really eye-catching. Rumble! Rumble! A rumbling sound rang out behind him. Mu Qing's face changed. Indeed, the deep-sea smelly sheetfish couldn't disgust them? They stunk, but they still wanted to chase after her. Mu Qing's heart jumped. She accelerated. She didn't want to be caught by those disgusting guards. Rumble! The guards were really fast. However, their bodies were pitch black, and they emitted a stench that couldn't be washed off. That stench diffused, making the grass and trees around shrink. Buzz, buzz. Looking at Mu Cheng, who was running crazily in front of them, the two guards flipped their hands. Instantly, a jade talisman appeared. That jade talisman emitted a dazzling light, and mysterious patterns moved on it. "Stop!" one of the guards shouted. His eyes widened and his face was full of ruthlessness. This old lady's brain must have gone haywire to stop. You two *T stain things should stop. Don't be disgusting, okay? Mu Cheng's long hair fluttered. Her long legs spread open as she dashed forward. She didn't even turn her head to look at them. The faces of the two guards darkened. They really had the urge to curse out loud. Who was she talking about? You were the one with *T. Your whole family is covered in *T. The guards were so angry that their kidneys ached. Things had become like this because of that woman. Now, that woman was still looking down on them. Simply unforgivable. Ancient jade lock. Pull. The jade talisman floating in front of the guard immediately emitted a brilliant light. Blue lightning arcs danced on it, and in the next instant lightning burst forth. It was as if it had transformed into a long whip as it lashed at Mu Cheng. Even the air was cracked at this moment. Mu Cheng was frightened. It's that King ancient jade lock again. Was there no end to this group of people? This old lady swore that the people she hated the most in this life were the people from the ancient jade Holy Land. Later on, whenever she saw the people from the ancient jade Holy Land, she would beat them up. Of course, if she couldn't beat them, she would run. Boom! Lightning bolts lashed around Mu Cheng's body. The ground cracked, sending sand and pebbles everywhere. Mu Cheng's figure rapidly moved. She was extremely fast. Her long legs stomped on the ground violently as she violently changed directions. Unexpectedly, the ancient jade lock couldn't hit her at all. The other guard's eyes focused. He opened his mouth and spurted out a stinky breath. His hand flipped, and a jade talisman floated in front of him. True energy rolled. A moment later, that jade talisman shot out. Heavenly suppressing talisman. Buzz. The guard's hand shook. That jade talisman quickly pressed down on Mu Cheng's position. The air seemed to squeak as if it couldn't bear the pressure. Mu Cheng's face was filled with fear. Damn it. These people really wanted to kill this old lady. Did they really need to do that? I just threw them a deep-sea smelly sheetfish. Mu Cheng's body moved quickly, but she couldn't dodge that heavenly shaking talisman. The ancient jade Holy Land was good at formations and spirit talismans. This heavenly shaking talisman and the ancient jade lock were both symbolic formations of the ancient jade Holy Land. Instantly, Mu Cheng felt like her entire body was filled with lead. She couldn't move at all. Her legs couldn't move at all. Boom, boom. The ancient jade lock lashed on her body, tearing her clothes. Her tender skin was now scorched black. Mu Cheng was enraged. She was so angry that her chest shook. She gritted her teeth and threw out two huge black shadows behind her in succession. The guard's eyes focused, and he immediately took action. However, after taking action, the guard finally got it. Holy *T. Was that King deep sea smelly sheetfish? Was this woman sick? Why did she bring so many deep sea smelly sheetfish with her? What kind of weird taste was that? However, it was too late to stop. Boom! The deep sea smelly sheetfish exploded in the air. Instantly, it turned into black chunks of meat that filled the sky. The stench also shot up into the sky. As the two guards were hit, their movements became sluggish. Mu Cheng took advantage of this opportunity to shout. True energy twirled around her body as she soared up into the sky. Above her head, the white soul ladder emerged one by one. After an explosion, Mu Cheng directly broke the heavenly shaking talisman's restraint, dashing away. Dragging his battered and charred body, he charged towards the long street. The two guards' faces darkened. This woman. She really deserved to die. Stomping their feet, the true energy on their bodies diffused, expelling the black smoke. The stench was so stinky that they almost vomited. With a rumble, they shot out like cannonballs. Gluttony God City's long street. People were walking back and forth on the long street. All of a sudden, the crowd screamed in fear. Everyone moved to the side in horror as they stared dumbfoundedly at the graceful figure that cut a sorry figure. That person's figure seemed a little familiar. Someone took a closer look and instantly screamed, "Isn't that Special Chef Moo of the Phoenix Pavilion? How did she become like this? How could she be so pathetic? Her clothes. Why are they so torn?" Everybody was wondering what kind of inhumane things Special Chef Moo had to endure in the future. Taotai Restaurant Bufang was lying on his chair. The sunlight shone on his face, making it blurry. He felt a wave of warmth covering his entire body. All of a sudden, Bufang was a little bewildered. He opened his eyes, looking into the distance. Over there, a graceful figure cut a sorry figure. Her torn clothes fluttered in the air, revealing a spring scene. As soon as Mu Qing saw Bufang, her eyes brightened. It was as though she had seen her savior. Swinging her arms, she dashed toward him. "Owner Bu! Save me!" Chapter 789. Owner Bu! Hurry up and save this old lady! Mu Qing strode forward, her long, white legs swaying under the sunlight. She looked very mesmerizing. Mu Qing's body was charred black, and her clothes were torn. Her fair and smooth skin was faintly discernible, causing quite a few people to involuntarily stare at her. Although Mu Qing cut a sorry figure, she was still as beautiful as ever. Even the way she strode forward was full of beauty. Bufang's squinted eyes widened. He was startled. What was that woman yelling? Why did it sound so strange? Wait a minute. That woman seemed to be Mu Qing from the opposite building. Bufang straightened his body. Looking at Mu Qing running toward him, he tilted his head. Many people in the surroundings sucked in a breath of cold air as horror surfaced in their eyes. Because they found that behind Mu Qing, there were two lumps of black sh*t running as fast as lightning. F*ck. It's so F*King Stinky. As the two lumps of sh*t dashed past, the Glutton God City's long street was filled with the stench. Each diner was so disgusted that they wanted to lean against the toilet wall and puke. What kind of smell was that? Did those two people just crawl out of a sh*t pit? They even chased after Special Chef Moo. Why did Special Chef Moo go to a sh*t pit to provoke those two lumps? Everybody pinched their noses, looking at the chase on the long street suspiciously. Some people wanted to make a move. After all, the one being chased was their goddess. If they could save their goddess, perhaps they could win her favor. How wonderful would that be? Unfortunately, the people who wanted to make a move lost their desire to do so when they saw the two lumps of sh*t moving. They were afraid that they would dirty their hands if they made a move. Boom! 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 Lightning swept out, pounding on the long street that had just been repaired. The broken stones on the street were sent flying everywhere. Mu Qing's body moved sideways, her face embarrassed. She had planned to run toward the Phoenix Pavilion, but when she reached the entrance, she suddenly remembered that the Phoenix Pavilion didn't have any experts. If she brought those two lumps of sh*t inside, then the Phoenix Pavilion would be finished, and she wouldn't be able to escape. Thus, at the last moment, Mu Qing chose to change. Hence, she flew in the direction of the Taotai restaurant. She wasn't worried that Bufang would be implicated because of her. After all, Bufang had a terrifyingly fat black dog with him. As long as the black dog used its claws, the two guards would be as weak as paper. That black dog was the real boss. Mu Qing felt that she should hold on tightly to the big boss's leg. Mu Qing finally understood how good it felt to have a thigh to hug. Therefore, Mu Qing decided that after this, she would definitely go back and cook a good dish to reward the boss. At the same time, she could improve their relationship and form a good impression. Perhaps the next time she was chased by someone, the boss would be able to strike again. Black smoke lingered in the distance, and the stench seemed to have transformed into a black cloud that covered the sky and covered the sun as it rushed toward the Taotai restaurant. Bufang's face instantly darkened. That stench lingered in his nose, and the corner of Bufang's mouth instantly twitched. It was so King stinky. Looking at the direction in which Mu Qing was running, it was in the direction of the Taotai restaurant. Bufang was stunned. Then, his eyes lit up, and a hint of speechlessness appeared on his face. What was Mu Qing doing? Why did she bring two fellows who had fallen into a manure pit to meet him? Moreover, what was the meaning of the other party's route? Bufang took a deep breath, and he couldn't help but stand up from his chair. Xiao Yu was startled. She opened her eyes, and in an instant, she saw the two guards covered in a dense black stench. "Owner Bu! Save me!" Mu Qing screamed with a hoarse voice. "No one can save you! Sky-shaking talisman, suppress!" One of the guards fiercely crushed the talisman. Instantly, the magic array within the talisman collapsed. That talisman magic array rapidly expanded, and in an instant, it covered the entire space. Boom! Mu Qing was about to reach Bufang's figure, and she instantly felt a huge pressure. Mu Qing raised her hand, and her eyes revealed a panicked expression. However, the gravity suddenly pressed down, and Mu Qing was instantly pressed onto the ground. She was completely unable to move. With a cracking sound, the crushed stones on the ground were all crushed by Mu Qing's body. The long lightning whip seemed to transform into a light blue dragon. With a huge roar, it smashed toward Mu Qing, who was pressed onto the ground by the pressure of the heaven-suppressing talisman. It seemed as though it wanted to whip Mu Qing to death. Everyone was so shocked that they couldn't be any more shocked, and they all let out cries of surprise. Mu Qing also felt despair. Lying on the ground, a deathly gray color appeared in her eyes. It seemed like she was really going to die this time. "Xiao Bai, chase these two lumps away. They're blocking the door and affecting our business," Bufang calmly said. Suddenly, just as his voice fell from the cloud mist Taotai restaurant behind Bufang, a terrifying aura spread out. That aura was incomparably vigorous, and it was extremely stable. All of a sudden, a tearing sonic boom rang out, and a red light shot out rapidly. The guard didn't expect that someone would dare to save Mu Qing in that area. It was an iron rod that had been branded red, and it was densely covered in profound talisman markings. A rumbling sound echoed. The guard holding the ancient jade lock was pierced by that stick, and a big hole appeared on his chest. The guard screamed miserably. The ancient jade lock was broken, and his entire body was smashed by that red-hot iron stick. He was lying on the ground, coughing blood. His vitality was draining rapidly. After the war god's stick pierced through a guard, it rolled in the air, and a giant iron puppet caught it. The guard who was controlling the heaven-shocking talisman did not expect that an unforeseen event would occur in this originally relaxed chase. His companion was actually pierced through by a rod. It was too painful. The guard's hand shivered. However, the metal wings on Xiao Bai's back slightly flapped, and the red-hot iron stick roared one more time. The air shook, and in the next moment it seemed to be torn apart. The war god's stick smashed the remaining guard to death. Mu Qing was dumbstruck, lying at her spot. She was bewildered as she watched the two guards, who were stained with the deep-sea smelly sheetfish's mucus, get killed by two sticks. Xiao Bai's metal wings flapped, and he landed on the ground, holding the red-hot iron stick in his hand. Two guards had died just like that? Anyway, it's good that they're dead. This stench is unbearable. Mu Qing crawled up from the ground. Looking at Bufang's calm face, she couldn't stay calm anymore. Her ample breasts shivered unceasingly. She said to Bufang seriously, "You should be careful. The Holy Land has sent someone to investigate." It could be said that Bufang was the one who had offended Yen Yu the most. Mu Qing didn't want Bufang to be killed just like that. But now, it seemed that her worries were unnecessary. This iron puppet was actually so strong. It was hard to say who would be the one to kill who. In the distance, a group of people slowly walked over. The leader was Yan Qing, whose face was dark and filled with rage. Yan Qing's group walked over, their faces beaming with excitement. Their auras were vigorous and vigorous. Energy twirled around their bodies. Yan Qing's face was so dark that it could drip water. The deep-sea smelly sheetfish's smell was too stinky. It made him, the commander of a holy land, feel ashamed. Yan Qing's group was really imposing and powerful. However, as they walked, the stench soared into the sky, making people cover their noses in disgust. It was as if they were disgusted by a bunch of moving feces. Yan Qing's mood became worse. The way people looked at him with disdain made him feel a flame of anger burning in his heart. At this moment, he hated that he couldn't capture Mu Qing, break her tendons, and torture her thoroughly. However, as soon as Yan Qing saw a white iron puppet, he attacked without any warning. Instantly, he pierced through the two guards who held the heavenly shaking talisman and the ancient jade lock, killing them instantly. At this moment, Yan Qing was completely bewildered. A moment later, everybody took in a breath of cold air. Yan Qing pulled himself together from his daze. His face darkened. Someone dared to kill the ancient Jade Holy Lands people in front of him. Damn it, Xiao Bai's chubby body stood next to Bufang. He held the stick with one hand while the other rested on the back of Bufang's chair. His eyes twinkled. Today, Xiao Bai was comparable to an almighty expert. How could a small trick like this make Xiao Bai sink? Yan Yu was so angry. However, as he walked over, his face changed several times. He didn't make a move. When he met Bufang's calm eyes, he felt his heart palpitate. It was as if he had been thrown into an ice cave. That feeling was extremely dangerous. Why did he have such a feeling? Yan Qing's heart trembled unceasingly. That sense of danger grew stronger and stronger. Within his powerful psychic energy, he seemed to sense an incomparably huge psychic energy fluctuation, like an unshakable towering mountain. That fluctuation made Yan Qing, who wanted to take action, stop. It was an extreme sense of danger, which came from the telepathic connection of an array grandmaster. Yan Qing stopped all the guards who were about to make a move. He glanced at the two dead guards, and the corners of his mouth twitched. Then, he lifted his head, looking straight at them. His eyes went past Xiao Bai, falling on Bufang one more time. That mysterious restaurant made him so scared, and the young man in front of him was the owner of that restaurant. No wonder the holy saint had told him to keep a low profile during the investigation. He didn't expect that this little restaurant could bring him such a terrifying pressure. Chapter 790. Yan Qing's heart shuddered, and he felt his hair stand on end. The pressure this restaurant brought him made his skin tighten. He didn't know why he had such a feeling. Was it because of the iron puppet in front of him, which had smashed his guards to death with 2 strikes of a stick? Observing the restaurant, Yan Qing took a deep breath when he saw the expressionless young man standing in front of the restaurant with his hands clasped behind his back. This restaurant was definitely strange. As they had just arrived at the Valley of Gluttony, they didn't have time to gather information. Thus, they didn't know much about this restaurant. Thus, Yan Qing didn't dare to act rashly. However, the death of the 2 guards had enraged Yan Qing. Of course, he wouldn't leave that easily. His eyes fell on Mu Qing, who was crawling up from the ground. As if she could feel his sharp gaze, Mu Qing didn't say anything. She got up and ran toward the Taotai restaurant. After a while, he disappeared without a trace. Yan Qing's eyes became colder. His body reeked. However, after such a short time, he seemed to have gotten used to this stench. Mu Qing definitely knew something. Yan Qing felt that he had to capture this woman. Since it was a restaurant in front of him, he would go there and have a taste of its dishes. The tense atmosphere seemed to disperse in just a blink of an eye. Yanqing looked at Bufang, a smile hanging on his face. He strode toward Bufang. You must be the owner of this restaurant, right? Since the restaurant is open, I'm sure it's open for business. If so, can I enter? Yanqing asked with a smile. Bufang was a little bewildered. He glanced at Yanqing, the corners of his mouth rising. No, answered Bufang. No? Yanqing was bewildered. The guards behind him were also bewildered. One of the hot-tempered guards directly released his aura, coldly looking at Bufang. It seemed like he would attack him if he didn't agree. However, Yanqing stopped him. Before he knew the background of this restaurant and this young man, Yanqing wouldn't take action. Why can't I enter? Isn't the restaurant open for business? Yanqing looked at Bufang in confusion. If the other party was really trying to protect that woman, Yanqing would have to make a move no matter how afraid he was. Although the restaurant was dangerous, as the saying goes, wealth comes from danger. If there was no danger to remind people, how could they grow? You stink too much. Also, the restaurant hasn't opened yet. Bufang walked a few steps and returned to the chair. He sat down, curled up on it, and said lazily, Not open for business yet? The main point was this guy complaining about the stench on their bodies? They were smelly, but what could they do? They were also in despair. The blood and stench of the deep-sea smelly sheetfish could not be washed away by Jinqi, and even water might not be able to wash away the stench easily. Therefore, the stench would follow them for a long time. But the main culprit that caused them to stink was the woman who had crawled into the restaurant. My restaurant hasn't opened for business yet. Please leave. Come back when it's open for business. Bufang narrowed his eyes. The warm sunlight shone on his face as he said nonchalantly. His words made Yanqing's eyes flash with sharpness. He was the great commander of the ancient Jade Holy Land, an existence at the half-step divine spirit realm, but he was repeatedly refused to enter a restaurant. People said that the chefs of the Valley of Gluttony were arrogant and savage. Now, it seemed that they lived up to their name. Unfortunately, in front of absolute power, their arrogance would be crushed into dregs. Then, if I insist on going in, Yanqing clasped his hands, his eyes sharp. Insist on going in, the corners of Bufang's mouth rose. He raised his hand, patting Xiao Bai's belly, who was standing next to him. Yanqing grinned. His slightly tanned face was set off by his big white teeth, which made him look very white. Your Excellency, you might look down on me a little. It's just an almighty puppet. I'm not sure it can stop me, Yanqing said. All of a sudden, from a distance, a figure was walking toward them. That figure's robe was unbuttoned, revealing his fair skin. His face was flushed, and he was holding a bamboo flask in his hand. From time to time, he would pour wine into his mouth. The corners of Emoluji's mouth rose. He felt that the Valley of Gluttony was indeed a paradise. There were so many kinds of delicious food and good wine that tickled people's taste buds. Emoluji had almost lost himself in this soft land filled with delicious food. However, he was lucky that he had a little bit of consciousness left. He knew why he came to the Valley of Gluttony. That was why he would go to Bufang's place every day to chat with Bufang. He planned to kidnap Bufang and bring him back to the heavenly secret Holy Land. No matter what, Bufang was the saintess inner demon. Granny Mo had given him a task, so of course, he would try his best to complete it. Emoluji? Of course, Yanqing knew Emoluji. He was an outstanding character in the heavenly secret Holy Land. Not only was he intimidating, but he also knew how to use the heavenly secret Holy Land's astrolabe to calculate. He was an existence that could predict things like a god. When the experts of the other Holy Lands met the people of the heavenly secret Holy Land, they would be cautious and afraid of them. Because the people of the heavenly secret Holy Land were good at calculating. Who knew if the people of the heavenly secret Holy Land had sold them out or not? They were still happily counting their money. The information mentioned Emoluji, but they didn't expect that he really existed. As soon as Emoluji appeared, he pulled a chair, holding a bamboo flask of wine. He sat next to Bufang, squinting at Bufang. Owner Bu, I sincerely invite you to visit the heavenly secret Holy Land. Granny Mo of the Holy Land can't wait any longer. Please give me face, okay? Emoluji said. Bufang looked at Emoluji with disdain. Can't you finish your wine first? Every day you drink this low-grade wine in front of my shop. It will lower the standard of my shop. Who will come to my shop to buy wine in the future? Bufang's words made sense. Emoluji rubbed his chin, bewildered for a while. But this wine was taken from Wenrin Shang's place. How did it become a low-grade wine? Emoluji hiccuped, his face bewildered. Yanqing frowned when he saw that Emoluji and Bufang were familiar with each other. Emoluji was so polite to Bufang. Moreover, he said that Granny Mo would wait for Bufang to go to the heavenly secret Holy Land? Of course, Yanqing knew Granny Mo of the heavenly secret Holy Land. She was the top existence of the royal court, an expert who could predict things like a god. How could Yanqing not know her? Although Granny Mo's existence wasn't as good as the holy saints, she couldn't investigate much. Thus, after listening to Emoluji's words, Yanqing became more cautious. Apparently, this little chef had a big background. His initial impulse to make a move immediately dissipated. He should wait and see. Yanqing gave Bufang a deep look, then left with his guards. Although Yanqing was enraged that 2 of his guards were killed, he was still a cautious person. If this little chef had the netherworld creature that could kill the Holy Saint's clone, he would have to die here. The Holy Saint had asked him to investigate, so he couldn't ruin the Holy Saint's plan just because he messed around. Emoluji was a little skeptical as he watched Yanqing and the others leave. He opened the bamboo tube and gulped down a mouthful of wine. The thick aroma of wine arose. Bufang sniffed. The corners of his mouth rose as he shook his head disdainfully. The sky gradually turned dark. 2 crescent moons rose from the horizon and quickly hung high in the sky. Inside and in Yanqing's upper body was bare. Many spirit herbs were stuck on his body. He wanted to use the fragrance of these herbs to wash away the stench. However, it didn't work. The stench on his body was like sticky sh*t, which made Yanqing go crazy. The Holy Saint's clone was destroyed by the restaurant owner's friend, and Chu Chongqing killed Yan Yu with one slap. Yanqing's face was dark and gloomy. A terrifying aura was moving around his body. Chu Chongqing of the Valley of Gluttony. Seems like I can only kill him first. That netherworld creature seems to be protecting the restaurant owner. I can kill that old man Chu Chongqing first. The one who killed my brother must die. Yanqing put down the report in his hand, exhaling deeply. His face was so cold. Chu Chongqing was just an almighty. If Yanqing took action, he could easily kill that old man. In Yanqing's eyes, ordinary almighties were just ants. Inside the Gluttony Gods building in the Valley of Gluttony, moonlight shone on the Gluttony Gods building from outside. The cold moonlight seemed to have a cold intent. When it shone on people, they felt like they were wearing a cold veil. Chu Chongqing stretched his body, standing up from the desk. His upper body was bare, revealing his bulging muscles. As his muscles moved, a terrifying aura diffused. Chu Chongqing clasped his hands, walking to the window. His white hair and beard fluttered in the wind. His deep eyes gazed at the scene outside the Gluttony Gods building. Today, the Valley of Gluttony was full of vitality. The Valley of Gluttony, which had been declining for so many years, seemed to have the momentum to rise again. To Chu Chongqing, it was something that made his heart and soul happy. Although Valley Master Xiao Ye was still young and couldn't handle many things properly, Chu Chongqing was here. Even if he had to risk his old life, Chu Chongqing would try his best to help Xiao Ye. There was a creaking sound. The door was pushed open. Chu Chongqing smiled, clasping his hands. He turned around and looked at the door. "You're back. Come in," Chu Chongqing said gently. Then, a small head came in from outside the door. There was a memory crystal inlaid between the eyebrows of that head. This little girl was none other than Xiaoya, who had stayed at Bufang's place for the whole day. Hua didn't come back with her. Xiaoya pulled a long face, sticking out her tongue. She carefully walked into the room and stood in front of Chu Chongqing. "You've played enough. Let's start today's study. You little girl. You're really naughty. But you're still so young. It's hard for you to be the Valley Master." Chu Chongqing lovingly rubbed Xiaoya's head, gently exhaling. In Chu Chongqing's eyes, Xiaoya was like his granddaughter. However, Xiaoya was the new Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony. She had to learn how to manage the Valley of Gluttony. Chu Chongqing hoped that Xiaoya could bring the Valley of Gluttony to greater glory. "Grandpa Chu, Xiaoya is going to study now." Xiaoya stayed at Bufang's place for the whole day. She was very happy. Sometimes, the memory crystal would glow, and many memories would flow into Xiaoya's head. This little girl had matured a lot. She also understood the heavy responsibility on her shoulders. Chu Chongqing smiled. The little girl had finally grown up. He patted Xiaoya's head. All of a sudden, Chu Chongqing's eyes focused. His nose twitched as he smelled a stench. This stench made his face a little strange. Slowly, he turned his head to look outside the window. There, a figure slowly took out a black longbow, indifferently looking at Chu Chongqing. The longbow was fully drawn, and terrifying energy gathered quickly. That person's hair fluttered in the wind as he coldly looked at Chu Chongqing. "Are you the one who killed my brother Yanyu? If that's the case, then you'll be buried with him." As soon as he said that, Chu Chongqing's eyes shrank. A pitch-black arrow suddenly appeared in front of Chu Chongqing. He couldn't dodge it. Puff! Blood splashed 3 feet. Chu Chongqing's pupils shrank. A big hole appeared in his chest. Chapter 791. A pitch-black arrow shot out soundlessly, not stirring up any wind or waves in the air. Chu Chongqing's eyes shrank. He raised his hand to protect Xiaoya, who was by his side. His body shook hard. Blood spurted from his chest. The black arrow had pierced through his chest, leaving a big, bloody hole. Blood was still gushing from the wound. "Who are you?" Chu Chongqing's face didn't change. He lifted his head to look at the man holding a longbow outside the window under the moonlight. Yan Cheng looked at Chu Chongqing, the corners of his mouth curling up. A strange look appeared in his eyes. He didn't expect Chu Chongqing to be so interesting. His chest was pierced through, and his vitality was draining fast. However, his face didn't change at all. "If you hadn't killed my brother, I wouldn't have attacked you," Yan Qing said indifferently. A moment later, he pulled the bowstring one more time. The string twanged. The silent black arrow pierced through the air, aiming at Chu Chongqing. Chu Chongqing's eyes were as bright as torches. They were like 2 bright lamps in the dark night. "Traitors should all die. I don't care whose brother he is. I, Chu Chongqing, have a clear conscience." Chu Chongqing roared, his hair fluttering in the wind. In the next moment, a terrifying aura suddenly burst forth from his body. "Valley Master, retreat. Go and find Owner Bu. After today, I can't help you anymore. I hope you can bring our Valley of Gluttony to glory." Chu Chongqing's eyes were like torches. He raised his hand, and a wave of air hit Xiaoya. Xiaoya's eyes shrank. She felt a force pushing her out of the Gluttony Gods building. There was a clang. The walls of the Gluttony Gods building shattered, and Xiaoya's body flew out. That wave of energy slowly sent her to the ground. Xiaoya's legs softened. Her big eyes gazed at the Gluttony Gods building, and tears rolled down her cheek. "Grandpa! Grandpa Chu!" After sending Xiaoya away, Chu Chongqing roared. His white hair and beard fluttered in the wind. He was in high spirit. His mind flickered, and the soul ladder emerged above his head. 8 steps of the soul ladder hovered in the air. A double-handled kitchen knife appeared in his hand. It spun in his hand as if it wanted to cut everything into pieces. Poochie! The black arrow silently pierced through Chu Chongqing's body one more time, making him stagger backward several steps. A deep pit was created on the ground. The arrow had pierced through the glutton god's building. People from the Holy Lands, everyone dares to bully my valley of gluttony. Today, even if I have to die, I will bite a piece of your flesh. Chu Chongqing's mouth was bleeding, and his eyes were bloodshot. He took a step forward, and the ground of the gluttony god's building collapsed. Boom! His aura surged. Chu Chongqing's glabella sparkled. Shortly after, the veins covered his body, and his aura rocketed again. In just a blink of an eye, Chu Chongqing had burst out his strongest power. Yan Qing had given him a lot of pressure. The other's power was too strong. The feeling he gave off was like a god. Chu Chongqing knew that he wouldn't be able to escape today. However, Chu Chongqing was enraged. He wasn't resigned. He was enraged. After sending Xiao Yu away, he decided to go all out. Looking at Chu Chongqing, who was dashing toward him, Yan Cheng's eyes were still indifferent. The moonlight shone on his body, making him look like he was wearing a thin veil. The moonlight shone on his chiseled face, making it look even sharper. It's no use. You're too weak, Yan Qing said indifferently. Yan Qing said calmly. An ancient, pitch-black longbow rested in his hand. Yan Cheng's slender fingers gently stroked the longbow, pulling the bowstring to its fullest. A moment later, he released his hand. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Countless black arrows shot out from the longbow. 1 arrow, 2 arrows, 3 arrows, they all pierced through Chu Chongqing, who was dashing toward him. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Chu Chongqing coughed blood. His eyes were as bright as stars. His aura surged, and the 8-step soul ladder above his head soared. He headed straight toward Yan Qing. Yan Cheng's face was emotionless as he continuously pulled the bowstring. Chu Chongqing's face was ferocious as he used his body to block the arrows. Under the moonlight, the two of them approached each other rapidly. All of a sudden, Yan Cheng's hand stopped pulling the bowstring. The corners of his mouth twitched, and a gleam of anger flashed in his eyes. He put down the longbow and raised his hand. Slowly, his hand covered Chu Chongqing's head, which was less than 2 inches away from his nose. Chu Chongqing's face was ferocious as he tightly grabbed Yan Cheng's hand that was holding the bow. Chu Chongqing of the Valley of Gluttony. I, Yan Qing, will remember you. Exhaling softly, Yan Qing said seriously. A moment later, true energy shot out from his hand. Boom! Chu Chongqing's body fell from the sky. Swish! Chu Chongqing grabbed Yan Cheng's hand and tore off a piece of Yan Cheng's sleeve. His 4 limbs were spread open, and his chest was full of bloody holes. His blood had almost dried up. Chu Chongqing's white hair and beard were dyed with blood. His dry hair fluttered in the wind. His eyelids were heavy as he looked at the 2 crescent moons in the night sky. The corners of his mouth rose. Xiao Yu was bewildered as she watched Chu Chongqing's body fall from the sky. She was scared out of her wits. Everything that had happened was beyond her imagination. All of a sudden, a buzzing sound came from a distance. Hua trod on the wind, her triflower snake eyes moving fast. In just a flash, she arrived by Xiao Yu's side. Seeing Hua, Xiao Yu felt as though she had found a life-saving straw. Hua, save the great elder. Save Grandpa Chu. Xiao Yu's voice carried a sobbing tone as tears flowed from her eyes. Yan Qing frowned. Looking at the torn clothes on his arm, he exhaled softly. Chu Chongqing. He would remember this name. He was a real man. Unfortunately, Chu Chongqing had killed Yan Yu, so he had to die. Holding his longbow, Yan Yu stepped out. In just a blink of an eye, he crossed the void and disappeared. The night sky resumed its tranquility. Only the stars twinkled, and the bright moon shone brightly. Chu Chongqing, who was falling helplessly from the void. Hua's triflower snake eyes moved. She looked at Xiaoya, then at Chu Chongqing's falling body. She took a step forward and appeared in front of Chu Chongqing, supporting his body. With just a touch, Flowery's eyes narrowed. Then, a helpless look appeared on her face. Chu Chongqing's body had been hit by 99 arrows. His entire body was full of holes and his vitality was gone. He would die without a doubt. Today, he was still alive because of Chu Chongqing's obsession with the Valley of Gluttony. Unfortunately, his obsession would disappear eventually. At that time, Chu Chongqing would die. Hua supported Chu Chongqing's body. After thinking for a while, her triflower snake eyes bloomed with radiance. A moment later, Hua's body became enormous. She turned into a gorgeous golden snake. The snake opened its mouth and its tongue curled. Chu Chongqing's body was sucked into it. Hua, what are you doing? Why did you eat the Great Elder? Xiaoya was so anxious that tears rolled down her cheeks. Flowery didn't know how to talk yet. She transformed into a little girl, reached out her hand and grabbed Xiaoya's hand. Then, they ran far away. Shortly, the two little girls ran on the long street, arriving in front of the Taotai restaurant. The restaurant's door was closed, but there was light inside. Xiaoya looked at Hua, and her red eyes brightened. Yeah, Big Brother might have a way to save Grandpa Chu. Xiaoya's heart was filled with hope. She started to knock on the restaurant's door. While knocking, she cried, calling for her big brother. Bufang seemed to hear the noise outside the door. He got up from his bed. He was wearing pajamas, which were unbuttoned, revealing Bufang's white, tender skin. He slowly walked down the stairs, rubbed his head and said faintly, "Stop knocking, I'm coming." With a squeak, he opened the door. What entered his sight were two pairs of big eyes staring at him. Xiaoya's eyes were red and her cute, exquisite face looked like a cat from crying. Hua's triflower snake eyes gazed at Bufang, emitting a different aura. Big Brother, save Grandpa Chu. The moment Xiaoya saw Bufang, she opened her mouth and cried. Bufang arched his brows. Rubbing her head, he brought them into the restaurant. As soon as Hua entered the restaurant, he ran to the path understanding tree and sat cross-legged next to Lord Go, squinting. Xiaoya, on the other hand, was sobbing intermittently as she recounted what had happened just now. Chu Chongqing was killed? Bufang's face was filled with surprise. The great elder of the Valley of Gluttony, Chu Chongqing, was killed in the Valley of Gluttony? This, Hua stood up, transforming into his snake form. His mouth wiggled. Instantly, Chu Chongqing's body was spat out from his mouth. Covered in sticky liquid, he fell on the ground. Chu Chongqing's entire body was covered in bloody holes. He was on his last breath. He would die without a doubt. If the seven-colored sky-devouring python didn't swallow him, he would have died many times. It was unknown when Nethery had climbed out of the Netherworld ship. She stood by Bufang's side and said calmly, "You was wearing a black dress." Her white, slender legs were dazzling. After the seven-colored sky-devouring python swallowed Chu Chongqing, it had used its energy to preserve his last wisp of vitality. That was why Chu Chongqing didn't die. If it hadn't done that, Chu Chongqing's last wisp of vitality wouldn't have lasted for a long time. Gulp. Then, Hua swallowed Chu Chongqing's body into her stomach. Lord Go lay under the path understanding tree. Slowly, he opened his eyes, yawned, turned around, and continued to sleep. It seemed he didn't care about this kind of thing. Bufang was surprised, looking at Hua. He reached out his hand to pinch Hua's chubby cheek. Then, he patted the little girl's head. He didn't expect that the little girl could do that. "All right, don't cry. Sleep early. Tomorrow's chef's challenge will be the elixir cuisine. At that time, we'll use the elixir cuisine to save Chu Chongqing." "That old man came at the right time," said Bufang, rubbing his hair. However, since the elixir cuisine was to save Chu Chongqing, he had to change some ingredients. Chapter 792. Valley of Gluttony. In the void trembled, like ripples spreading out. In the next moment, a figure slowly stepped out of the ripples, and his appearance gradually became clearer. Yanqing frowned, his face cold. He carried the black longbow on his back. Raising his hand, he looked at his torn sleeve. The corners of his mouth rose into a cold smile. An ant is just an ant. In front of a giant like the Holy Lands, the Valley of Gluttony can only be trampled. So what if others bully you? The only thing you can do is tear off a piece of my sleeve. Yanqing stamped his foot on the ground and muttered to himself. Suddenly, his body shook. The clothes on his body immediately tore apart, revealing his well-proportioned and fair body. A guard stepped forward and helped Yanqing put on some clothes. Then, Yanqing sat on his seat, his body slanted, and he raised his hand to support his chin. The one who killed my brother is dead. Now, only the holy saint's task hasn't been completed. I can imagine that the netherworld creature that tore the holy saint's clone is in that mysterious restaurant. Yanqing's eyes looked pensive. Commander Yan, do you need me to go there to check? I will be very careful. A guard looked at Yanqing, clasping his fists. Yanqing lifted his eyes slightly and moved his finger to tap on the table. He glanced at the guard and shook his head. No need. If you go there, you will just die. It's meaningless. That netherworld creature could kill the holy saint's clone. Even if you want to escape, you can't. The guard was startled. He didn't say anything else. If Commander Yen said he couldn't escape, then he couldn't. Isn't there a chef's challenge tomorrow? Is it the chef's challenge between the restaurant owner and Lu Jelly, the jade scale knife on the tablet of gluttony? Yanqing rubbed his chin. The guards nodded. The entire city knew about the chef's challenge tomorrow. They would know about it. Good. Then, we will go there tomorrow to observe, said Yanqing. As his voice faded, the guards quietly retreated. The room resumed its tranquility. Only the sound of breathing could be heard. The next day, at dawn, the glutton god city's tranquil atmosphere was washed away by the warm sunlight. The entire city seemed to have come back to life. People came and went, and the peddlers started their daily business. There was a huge flow of people entering and exiting the city gate. There was a crunching sound. The door of the restaurant opened. Bufang yawned lazily and walked out of the door. The warm sunlight shone on his face, making him feel warm all over. Twisting his neck, Bufang strode out of the restaurant. Yu's tall figure also dashed out of the restaurant and stood beside Bufang. Her long, straight black hair cascaded down, and her face was expressionless. In the distance, a few figures slowly approached. Xiaoya dragged Hua and rushed over. Xiaoya's eyes were swollen from crying, and she looked exhausted. It was obvious that she had not slept all night. When she saw Bufang, she couldn't help but look excited. Big brother! Xiaoya dragged Hua and dashed over. Hua still had that cold expression. However, when they arrived at Bufang's restaurant, Hua narrowed his eyes. He wanted to enter the house and sit cross-legged beside a black dog under the path understanding tree. However, Bufang grabbed his head and pulled him back. Let's go. Let's go to the chef's challenge. Bufang said. Can this chef's challenge save Grandpa Chu? Xiaoya curiously raised her head and asked. It can, Bufang rubbed the little girl's head, replying calmly and confidently. You followed behind them, not saying a word. Then, the group of people walked toward the distance. Suddenly, a figure wrapped in a black robe appeared on the side of the road. That figure came to Bufang's side and lifted his hood, revealing a handsome face. His bangs fell down and streaked across Bufang's eyes. Bufang, young man. Where's the spicy strip we agreed on? Where's I's spicy strip? Hades Era's eyes revealed his excitement. He had finally gotten rid of that clingy little fairy. Spicy strip. I've been busy practicing cooking, so I didn't have time to make spicy strips. How about you wait a little longer? Bufang said. Hades's nostrils flared, glancing at Bufang. Who are you trying to fool? You're busy. You've been lying in front of the restaurant all day, and you're telling I that you're busy? Hades' era was so angry, but he still maintained a smile. All right, I'll wait. Bufong young man is not busy. Bufong's mouth twitched, revealing an expression that made Hades' era want to beat him up. The group continued walking, heading to the end of the long street. Lu Jelly's restaurant was not far, at the end of the long street in the Glutton God City. Lu Jelly was already standing in front of the restaurant. His restaurant was called the Jade Scale Restaurant, named after the famous knife in his hand, the Jade Scale knife. His restaurant was really big, and it wasn't smaller than the Phoenix Pavilion. No matter what, he was a special grade chef, so he had a good reputation and skills. Of course, his business wouldn't be bad. Lu Jelly leaned against the door of the Jade Scale Restaurant. He was wearing a clean chef's uniform. His long hair was tied up with a metal hoop. He was holding an old book in his hand and he was flipping through it. While reading, he nodded from time to time, as though he was fascinated. He didn't see Bufong's group coming. When he turned the page, he felt some auras in front of him. He lifted his head and saw Bufong's group. You're here. Lu Jelly's face became serious. He straightened his body, looking at Bufong's group. Bufong was here, which meant that the chef's challenge was about to begin. Around them, besides Bufong's group, many diners who had come to watch the chef's challenge had also come. Lu Jelly turned around, bringing Bufong's group into the Jade Scale Restaurant. The other guards led the diners to the first floor of the restaurant. Just like the Phoenix Pavilion, the first floor of the Jade Scale Restaurant also had a projection array, which allowed people to watch the chef's challenge clearly. Today's theme was the elixir cuisine. This made many people excited. The elixir cuisine was an extremely expensive and precious dish. Ordinary chefs couldn't cook it because it was different from ordinary dishes. It required a lot of energy. There was a legend that the real top-grade elixir cuisine could revive the dead. Of course, it could just be a legend. After so many years in the Valley of Gluttony, there weren't many people who studied the elixir cuisine, and there weren't many records about it. Lu Jelly was still the #1 chef in the entire Valley of Gluttony when it came to cooking elixir cuisine. Bufong wasn't a stranger to the elixir cuisine. In fact, he had relied on the elixir cuisine to start his career. Regarding the elixir cuisine, Bufong had his own unique views. Of course, with Bufong's mental energy, it wasn't difficult to cook the elixir cuisine. They came to the second floor, which was very spacious. Obviously, Lu Jelly had prepared a lot for this chef's challenge. I didn't think that the last chef's challenge would be between you and me, Lu Jelly said, looking at Bufong. I've been observing and studying you since your first chef's challenge. However, you're really magical. It seems that every time, you'll bring out dishes that are beyond people's expectations. So, I'm really looking forward to the chef's challenge with you. Lu Jelly walked to the stove, placing both of his hands on it, smiling at Bufong. At this moment, Bufong was observing the entire second floor of the Jade Scale Restaurant, his eyes indifferent. In the second floor, there was a thick medicinal aroma. Obviously, there were a lot of medicinal ingredients piled up on the second floor. The competition of the elixir cuisine can't rely on the judges. Because the competition of the elixir cuisine doesn't focus on the taste and texture. It focuses on the efficacy. Whether the ingredients can bring out the efficacy is the most important thing, said Lu Jelly. He raised his hand, patting. The sound of his hand hitting the ground reverberated on the second floor. Through the projection formation, everyone held their breath. Boom! Boom! 2 steel cages fell from the sky and smashed on the ground of the second floor, causing the entire second floor to tremble. Lu Jelly clasped his hands, walking slowly to the front of the cages. He raised his hand, patting the steel cage. Buzz, as the light flickered, the scene within the cage gradually became clear. It was actually 2 injured spirit beasts. They were spirit beasts that looked like they were carrying a small mountain on their backs. These are mountain-carrying boars, spirit beasts that die easily. Now they are on the verge of death. Let's compete to see who can save those spirit beasts faster. Who will win? What do you think? Lu Jelly looked at Bufang, his eyes sparkling. He was a little excited. Finally, he could have a competition to his heart's content. He had calmed his heart, studying in seclusion for so many days. Finally, today, he could defeat Bufang, ending a chef's challenge winner. That feeling made people's blood boil. They were so excited. Bufang looked at the two pigs, the corners of his mouth twitching. His eyes moved, falling on Lu Jelly. This is too troublesome. What's the point of saving pigs? Let's save him, Bufang said. Bufang's words made Lu Jelly freeze on the spot. He didn't think that Bufang would reject his suggestion. You said, who should we save? Lu Jelly took a deep breath, asking. The corners of Bufang's mouth rose. He raised his hand, patting Hua's head. Hua's triflower snake eyes turned, looking at Bufang. Then, he took a step back, and his figure suddenly changed. He turned into a big snake. The big snake opened its mouth, and viscous liquid flowed out. Chu Changxing's body, which was full of holes, was spat out. Lu Jelly was instantly dumbfounded, as if he had been struck by lightning. What was going on? For this chef's challenge, Bufang beat the Great Elder half to death? That was impossible. It wasn't just Lu Jelly. Through the projection formation, when everyone saw Chu Changxing's badly wounded body, they were dumbstruck. The fellow that was spat out from the snake's mouth, was it really Elder Chu? Swoosh. Everybody was in an uproar. The Great Elder was wounded and dying. Was this a joke? Last night, during the battle in the Gluttony restaurant, everybody thought that the Great Elder had driven the enemies away. Unexpectedly, the Great Elder was almost killed. Looking at the Great Elder's pitiful appearance, everybody's mouths trembled. On the first floor, Yan Cheng, who was clasping his hands, grinned. Chu Changxing wasn't dead yet. He was really lucky. However, Yan Cheng's eyes were sharp. At first glance, he could see Chu Changxing's condition. His vitality was gone, leaving only a wisp of will. As long as that will was broken, Chu Changxing would die. In such a situation, let alone the elixir cuisine, even the real divine herbs couldn't save him. This chef's challenge is interesting. Yan Qing sneered. Lu Jelly sucked in a breath of cold air. This time, the elixir cuisine was used to save the Great Elder? Impossible. The Great Elder's vitality is gone. He's a dead man now. How could he be saved? Lu Jelly's face was ashen, and he staggered. Bufang took out a velvet rope from his system-dimensional bag and tied his hair. His eyes turned to Lu Jelly. I said I can save him, so I can save him, said Bufang. Lu Jelly's eyes were like torches. Good. If you can save the Great Elder, I, Lu Jelly, admit defeat in this chef's challenge. Chapter 793. Chu Changxing's body was riddled with bloody holes. There was a big hole in his heart, and his internal organs were all ruptured. The vitality in his body had been destroyed. Now, all that was left was the death aura twirling around his body. The death aura was so thick that it made people shiver uncontrollably. Lu Jelly asked himself. It wasn't a problem of the elixir cuisine anymore. Even if he had divine herbs, he wouldn't be able to save Chu Changxing. At this moment, saving Chu Changxing was as difficult as bringing a dead man back to life. It wasn't to heal his wounds, but to snatch his life from the Grim Reaper. Lu Jelly took several steps back, his face grimacing. He had never thought that Bufang would give him such a difficult problem. This problem was so difficult that it made him feel hopeless. He didn't have the power to save Chu Changxing. Even if he had divine herbs in front of him, he didn't have the power to do so. Through the projection formation, everybody saw Lu Jelly's helpless and lonely face. Instantly, they felt a wave of sorrow in their hearts. No one had ever thought that great elder Chu Chongqing would encounter such a situation. Who was it that dared to do such a thing to the first elder? The corners of Yan Cheng's mouth curled up, showing his interest. The guard next to him came to Yan Cheng and asked, "Commander Yan, do you need us to erase Chu Chongqing's last wisp of vitality?" Yan Cheng played with his jet-black hair, squinted at the guard and said indifferently, "You dare to attack in front of so many people? Even if you do, are you sure you can destroy that wisp of vitality?" The guard was bewildered, hesitating for a moment. "Did you see the giant snake that swallowed Chu Chongqing?" "I couldn't see it clearly, but I'm sure that without that giant snake, Chu Chongqing's last wisp of vitality would have been shattered. If that giant snake wanted to kill you, you wouldn't even be able to blink." The guard was shocked and terrified. He looked at Hua, gulping. "Commander, is that the netherworld creature that killed the holy saint's clone?" Yan Cheng's mouth twitched, shaking his head. "Shut up, don't talk anymore. The netherworld creatures have nether energy on their bodies. The beautiful woman next to that snake is nether energy. As for that snake, it's not." The guard looked at him awkwardly, took a step back, and didn't say anything else. Yan Cheng, on the other hand, looked at the projection array seriously. "If I can save him, will you admit defeat? Do I win the chef's challenge?" Bufang raised his brows, glancing at Lu Jieli. Lu Jieli nodded in a serious manner. "Although my research on elixir cuisine is very thorough, I'm just a chef after all. I'm not a doctor. I can't bring a person back to life and regrow flesh and bones. I can't save the already dead Elder Chu. I can't, but if you can, I don't mind admitting defeat. All right, deal." Bufang looked at Lu Jieli and nodded. Crash. In the next moment, Bufang no longer paid attention to Lu Jieli. He pulled up the sleeve of his vermilion robe, revealing his fair arm. His other arm was wrapped in bandages made by the black and white Taotais. Bufang made a hand seal. His mental force immediately poured into the black and white bandages. Instantly, the bandages seemed to wake up, wrapping around his arm. Swish, the bandage whipped in the air, as if it was about to shatter the void. Roar. The black and white Taotia's souls emerged, roaring at each other. Then, under Bufang's control, the bandages wound around Chu Chongqing's body. The bandages grew longer and thicker. Shortly after, Chu Chongqing was tied up like a mummy, tightly wrapped up. Thud. Chu Chongqing, who was tied up tightly, landed on the ground. He straightened his body and stood up. The bandages on Bufang's hand disappeared, revealing his black and white arm. His arm was covered in dense lines. One side was black, while the other side was white. The two lines entangled with each other, creating a terrifying scene. Bufang seemed to be used to it. His hand shook and green smoke twirled. The black turtle constellation wok emerged from his hand, pounding on the stove. Everybody retreated, leaving the stage to Bufang. Everybody was curious. What method did Bufang have to save the dying Chu Chongqing? How could he snatch his life from the Grim Reaper's hand? Spirit herbs flew out of Bufang's system-dimensional bag, landing on the stove. As soon as those spirit herbs appeared, a thick medicinal aroma filled the entire place. Hiss, many people took in a breath of cold air. Everyone's eyes were filled with amazement. One-leaf acheron grass, three-petal flower of helplessness, extreme amethyst willow. These are the top herbs in the divine soul realm. If we don't control them well, they could turn into the ultimate poison. Lu Jieli was knowledgeable, and he had read a lot of books. Of course, he could recognize those spirit herbs. The medicinal aroma of those spirit herbs was really thick. Moreover, each of them was really beautiful. However, the more beautiful they were, the stronger their potency was, and the more poisonous they were. Every medicine was 30% poisonous. With so many herbs mixed together, the toxicity wouldn't be weak. Did Bufang want to save someone or kill them? Just a little bit of this kind of top-grade elixir would be enough to kill an almighty expert. Moreover, with Bufang's cultivation base, how could he get such precious spirit herbs? Lu Jelly took in a breath of cold air. No matter if it was the acheron grass or the flower of helplessness, they were all precious herbs. Some of them couldn't even be found in the hidden dragon continent. For example, the acheron grass was a kind of spirit herb that grew in the netherworld. Lu Jelly had only read about it in ancient books. Legend had it that the netherworld had a long, blood-red river. Corpses and resentful souls floated in that river. That river was called the Acheron. The water was extremely poisonous, and touching it could melt people's flesh and blood. And this Acheron grass was the spirit herb that grew by the Acheron River. How could Bufang have this kind of thing? Lu Jelly was bewildered. His eyes shifted, falling on you from a distance. He contemplated. Right. This woman was a netherworld creature. Perhaps she had given Bufang the Acheron grass, however. Relying on the Acheron grass alone couldn't save Chu Chongsheng. What did Bufang want to do? Actually, at this moment, Yu and Hades were also shocked. They had never thought that Bufang would take out a spirit herb like the Acheron grass. Hades gawked, his eyes filled with astonishment. The Acheron grass by the Acheron River. It's something that the great sage of the Acheron, that old fool. How did Bufang get it? Did that mangy dog give it to him? It shouldn't be. That mangy dog hates water. Why would he go to the Acheron grass? Yu's black eyes twinkled as she gazed at Bufang. She knew that Bufang had a secret. That secret seemed to be very big. This made her more interested. Of course, she was also interested in the dragon blood rice. One-leaf Acheron grass was the lowest grade of Acheron grass. However, no matter what, it was still an Acheron grass, so its medicinal effect was still there. Of course, those herbs weren't given to him by anyone. Bufang had exchanged them from the system. To exchange for these spirit herbs, Bufang had spent a lot of money. Opening his mouth, Bufang's eyes focused. Instantly, the golden-red heaven and earth obsidian flame flew out. Under the control of Bufang's powerful mental force, it wrapped around the spirit herbs. The terrifying temperature exploded, and the spirit herbs melted at a speed visible to the naked eye. Shortly, they turned into drops of liquid. These drops of liquid were brutally mixed by Bufang, turning into a silver-gray color. The silver-gray color surged, changing its shape. After doing all this, Bufang put the ball of liquid into the black turtle constellation wok. Instantly, the temperature in the wok rose, and the liquid in the wok began to boil. Tap 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 tap, a long and narrow spirit ginseng was pinched by Bufang. The golden dragon bone kitchen knife quickly cut it, cutting the spirit ginseng into pieces. The pieces flew into the black turtle constellation wok, bobbing up and down. Dense medicinal energy burst forth, emitting a dense color that seemed to envelop the entire wok. Gurgle, gurgle, everyone seemed to be able to hear the sound of the liquid boiling in the black turtle constellation wok. The smoke that was spurting out seemed to have turned silver. Everyone felt as though their bodies were shrouded in a cold aura. In the next instant, Bufang's hand shook, and a stream of light appeared. It was as though a beast's roar could be heard. Thump, thump, the sound of heartbeats could be heard. Everyone's expression changed drastically at this moment. This sound. Some people clutched their hearts, and their faces became incomparably pale. Hua's triflower snake eyes turned, and he flicked his tongue. Hades' Era's eyes rolled around. Lu Jelly's mouth opened wide, and he was shocked beyond words. This is the Taotia's heart? Lu Jelly was enlightened, and he seemed to have completely woken up at this moment. The Taotia's heart was the heart of an ancient spirit beast. It could revive the dead, and it could even regrow flesh and bones. The Taotia's heart was obtained by Bufang, and he had never thought that Bufang would be willing to use it to save someone. Was this chef's challenge really that important to Bufang? Lu Jelly looked at Bufang with a complicated gaze. Inside the projection array, everyone had just recovered from the shock of seeing the Acheron grass, and they were once again shocked by the Valley of Gluttony. That was the King Taotia's heart. It was the Taotia's heart of the ancient spirit beast, the Taotai. Even if it was damaged, it was still an incomparably precious treasure. This kind of treasure, Bufang was actually willing to use it to save someone. Yan Cheng's eyeballs gradually expanded, and they became huge. Crack! The chair he was sitting on was smashed into pieces by his palm. His body emitted a terrifying aura, and everyone who was immersed in their excitement felt a wave of fear. The Taotia's heart, Yan Qing grinned, and his eyes revealed a trace of excitement. How could he waste such a precious treasure on a useless ant? If he could obtain the Taotia's heart, the shackles that had been restraining him would be broken instantly. His divine altar would be ignited, and he would step into the divine spirit realm. This Taotia's heart was very useful to him. In front of such temptation, Yan Qing could no longer maintain his calm heart. Yan Qing stood up, and the energy on his body surged. Guards appeared around him one after another. Why waste such a precious Taotia's heart on an ant? Owner Bu, why don't you give it to me? I will definitely remember Owner Bu's kindness. Yan Cheng's eyes widened, and his face revealed a twisted smile. A moment later, the longbow on his back was placed in his hands. Jade talismans floated around his body, and terrifying waves of true energy spread out. The atmosphere in the Jade Scale restaurant instantly became tense. Chapter 794. Thump, thump. The Taotia's heart throbbed violently, causing a layer of energy to ripple in all directions. Everyone's eyes were attracted to the heart. The heart was scarlet, and it was covered with sinister blood vessels. There were 6 orifices on the heart, and each orifice was surging with energy, causing people's hearts to tremble. Bufang held the Taotia's heart in one hand, his eyes indifferently sizing it up. The hand he used to hold the Taotia's heart was covered in black and white lines, and waves of strange energy surged out. If he wanted to save Chu Chongqing, ordinary methods would not work. Only the Taotia's heart was left. Of course, if there was a better ingredient than the Taotia's heart, perhaps Bufang could give it a try. However, other than the phoenix egg in the Cloud Mist restaurant, which could be compared to the Taotia's heart, Bufang had not met any other ingredient that was better than the Taotia's heart. Even if he did, he was afraid that he would have already kicked the bucket. Holding the Taotia's heart, Bufang slowly placed it into the Black Turtle constellation Wa. Gurgle, the silver liquid started to boil, and it seemed to transform into many arms. They reached out from the Black Turtle constellation Wak, grabbing the Taotia's heart and pulling it in. Stop messing around. Bufang's mind flickered, and his mental energy instantly surged, suppressing the silver liquid. Rumble. Then, the entire Taotia's heart entered the Black Turtle constellation Wak. The moment the Taotia's heart entered the Wak, Bufang's entire mind shook. It was as if his mind had been hammered by a heavy hammer. Bufang's eyes darkened, and he felt a little dizzy. The energy contained in the Taotia's heart was too enormous, and it seemed as if it was about to scatter the mental energy that Bufang had placed in the Black Turtle constellation Wak. Bufang let out a muffled groan, and his stumbling figure immediately stabilized. A trace of seriousness appeared in his eyes. He let out a long breath, and his turbulent spirit sea instantly calmed down. His mental energy transformed into strands of silk threads that wrapped around the Taotia's heart. It was as if he wanted to entangle the Taotia's heart completely. Dong dong. Thump thump. In an instant, Bufang's eardrums started to vibrate. In his ears, the beating of the Taotia's heart became even more intense. It was deafening. Bufang was so upset that he almost had a nosebleed. No wonder it was the heart of an ancient divine beast. Even if it was a broken heart, it was still so terrifying. In the next moment, Bufang took a step forward, raised his hand, and pressed his palm on the Black Turtle constellation Wak, causing the connection between him and the Black Turtle constellation walk to deepen. Lu Jelly took a few steps back, took a deep breath and looked at Bufang. His eyes flashed. The heart of an ancient divine beast like the Taotia's heart was a top-notch ingredient. However, not everyone could cook such a top-notch ingredient. The remnant pressure from the Taotia's heart was enough to shatter an ordinary chef's mind and make them go crazy. Bufang's cultivation base wasn't high, but he dared to cook the Taotia's heart. To him it was really crazy. However, looking at Bufang's calm appearance, Lu Jelly felt that perhaps this kid could really create a miracle. On the first floor of the Jade Scale restaurant, Yan Cheng's entire body emitted a terrifying aura. His aura was so oppressive that it made the group of people in the building feel extremely uncomfortable. Some of them even coughed up blood and retreated because of his aura. Many people couldn't stand his pressure, so they left the Jade Scale restaurant. Many people looked at him in horror. The strength that Yan Cheng had displayed was too strong. Yan Cheng's eyes were filled with desire. He had never thought that the Taotia's heart would be so close to him. Of course, he knew that Amethyst Elder and Bai Liantian from the Wavering Light Holy Land had appeared in the Valley of Gluttony. They had failed to obtain the Taotia's heart. Yan Cheng had thought that they had been defeated by some peak existence, which was why they couldn't obtain the Taotia's heart. However, today, the Taotia's heart appeared in the hands of a divine physique echelon realm ant. Perhaps that ant had some powerful existence protecting him. However, in front of the temptation of the Taotia's heart, Yan Cheng couldn't bear it anymore. This was an opportunity that belonged to him. As long as he could obtain the Taotia's heart, his cultivation base would take a crucial step forward. The chance to ignite the divine flame and enter the divine spirit realm was right in front of him. Owner Bu, I wonder if you are interested in my suggestion? It would be a great waste to use the Taotia's heart to save that ant. Why don't you give it to me? I will definitely repay Owner Bu well. Yan Cheng said. His voice was so penetrating that it could be heard from the first floor to the second floor, ringing in everyone's ears. Outside the Jade Scale restaurant, everyone was filled with righteous indignation. That person dared to say that the Great Elder was an ant. The Great Elder was the god in the hearts of the people of the Valley of Gluttony. He was the god of war, the pillar of support. This person dared to insult the Great Elder. Damn it! Many people were so angry that they clenched their fists. They couldn't wait to rush in and fight with Yan Cheng. However, they knew that they weren't Yan Cheng's match. In front of Yan Cheng, they were nothing more than ants. Sometimes, the helplessness of power could make people feel hopeless. Now, they could only pin their hopes on Owner Bu. They hoped that Owner Bu could withstand the pressure and not give the Taotia's heart to Yan Cheng. Yan Cheng's eyes emitted a strange light. He held a black longbow in his hand, and jade talismans glowed around his body. Runes filled the air. They coiled together, and energy fluctuated unceasingly. Around Yan Cheng, the 12 guards also arranged themselves in a battle formation. Energy rose, forming a massive phantom above their heads. That phantom held a long dagger axe, roaring at the second floor. Owner Bu. How is he? After a long time, Bufang didn't reply. Yan Cheng was also enraged. His eyes focused, and he directly questioned Bufang. His voice was like thunder, exploding in the restaurant. On the second floor, Lu Jelly's face was flushed red. His eyes were filled with rage, and his fists were tightly clenched. Bufang furrowed his brows. He closed his eyes, and his spirit sea was boiling. Countless strands of spirit entwined around the Taotia's heart. At this moment, he didn't have the mood to answer Yan Cheng's question. Naturally, he didn't want to bother with him. However, Yan Cheng didn't take it lying down. He continuously roared. Actually, it was also Yan Yu's test. Although Yan Yu coveted the Taotia's heart, he was also a little cautious about the netherworld creature that had destroyed the Holy Saint's clone. He was testing whether the netherworld creature was on the second floor or not. His voice was also gradually mixed with energy in order to achieve his goal of probing. Even after hearing so many voices, Bufang still didn't move. The smile on Yancheng's face became wider. He raised his other hand and pulled the bowstring of his black longbow. The sound of the bowstring being pulled reverberated. "Owner Bu, you might not know this, but the wounds on Chu Chongqing's body were caused by me. If I want Chu Chongqing dead, he must die. Even if you use the Taoye's heart to save him, it will be a waste. Why don't you give it to me? You can still get some benefits." Rumble. Yen Cheng's voice reverberated throughout the entire second floor. Lu Jelly's eyes were completely red. This fellow had gone too far. He stared at the black turtle constellation walk and the Taoye's heart floating in it. He had to succeed. He had to save the great elder. He couldn't let that fellow continue to be so arrogant. Bufang's brows furrowed even tighter. His mind was boiling, and the temperature of the second floor rose at this moment. Xiaoya hugged Hua's body tightly, her eyes filled with worry. Yu leaned to the side, her eyes calm. Nether King Ha was wrapped in a long black robe, playing with his fingers in boredom. Boom! All of a sudden, Yancheng took a step forward. The entire Jade Scale restaurant was shaken. Everybody's heart was shaken. Since Owner Bu doesn't want to answer me, I have to go up personally to talk to Owner Bu. Yanqing said with a smile. Then, he burst into laughter and took another step forward. His body soared up into the sky, and he almost reached the second floor. His eyes, which were closed tightly, opened all of a sudden. His eyes were so deep, as though they contained the surging waves of the sea. His terrifying mental energy made Bufang feel dizzy. "Get lost!" Bufang opened his mouth and looked at the staircase with a sharp gaze. Then, he let out a long howl. Everybody's face changed. Yen Cheng's face became fierce in just a blink of an eye. "I gave you face, but you don't want it. You're courting death." Swish! The longbow in Yen Cheng's hand was pulled to the limit. A moment later, he loosened his grip, and a pitch-black arrow streaked across the air, shooting toward Bufang's head at high speed. That arrow didn't make a sound, and it was so fast that ordinary eyes couldn't catch it. Many people's hearts were lifted and they shivered. Bufang's eyes were deep. His hair fluttered, and the velvet rope that tied his hair snapped. Swish! When the black arrow was 1 inch away from Bufang's head, it halted. It couldn't move an inch further. At this moment, Bufang's body was surrounded by thick mental energy, which was about to materialize. That black arrow was bound by Bufang's mental energy, and it couldn't move an inch further. Yanqing took one step at a time, almost reaching the second floor. His eyes were as bright as torches. He could see through that, and he was a little frightened. "You're worthy of being Owner Bu. You do have some tricks, but in my eyes, you're no different from Chu Chongqing. You're both ants." Boom! Yanqing pulled his bow again. A moment later, tens of thousands of black arrows shot out from his longbow, aiming at Bufang. It was this move that had cut off all of Chu Chongqing's vitality, leaving him with only his last breath. And now it was the same move again. Xiao Ya's eyes were filled with rage. Bufang's face was indifferent. He slowly closed his eyes, and his mind lingered, coiling around the Taoye's heart. He said indifferently, "Little Ha, attack. I'll give you 5 spicy strips in exchange for your attack. Don't kill him. I want to let him know what despair is." Chapter 795. Several miles away from the Jade Scale restaurant, a silhouette sat on a branch of a thick, old tree with luxuriant leaves. He was barefooted, and his robe was unbuttoned, revealing his fair skin. In his hand was a bamboo flask of wine, which he was sipping from. "Great Commander Yen of the ancient Jade Holy Land. He's another person blinded by greed. The Taoye's heart is so precious. How could Amethyst Elder and Bailientian ignore it? However, they didn't do anything until now. It's because they're afraid. Emoluji gulped down a mouthful of wine. The corners of his mouth curled up, and his long hair swayed. He exhaled a breath that reeked of alcohol, and his face was flushed. He raised his hand, and true energy swirled around his hand like silk threads. A moment later, a dazzling star compass appeared. The star compass shone with dazzling starlight. Tens of thousands of rays of light seemed to connect to form a mysterious path, and within that path there was a dazzling light. Yencheng. He's in big trouble this time. I'll make a deduction for him for free. That fellow will be beaten to death. Runes seemed to flash in Emoluji's eyes. A moment later, they disappeared. He gulped down another mouthful of wine, laughing loudly. The great commander of the ancient Jade Holy Land would be beaten to death. Just thinking about it made him feel excited. Bufang, young man, do you mean what you said? Are you really going to exchange 5 chili strips for Eye's help? Hades's figure, which was wrapped in a black cloak, became clear. His face revealed a surprised expression as he asked with uncertainty, "Promise me that you won't buy on credit anymore." Bufang's eyes were deep. The mental energy around his body seemed to have solidified, and a terrifying aura spread out. "I won't buy on credit. After this matter, I'll make chili strips for you," Bufang said calmly. When Hades heard that, his energy shot up into the galaxy. Immediately, his chi soared to the stars and he laughed loudly. The black robe on his body exploded with a bang, revealing his handsome figure. "Ownerbu, I like good-looking and sensible young men like you." "Ah." In the next instant, Hades took a step forward and appeared in front of Bufang. His handsome figure blocked in front of Bufang, and the corners of his mouth curled up as he looked at the densely packed pitch-black arrows. Yencheng's eyes were cold. The murderous aura on his body was getting denser and denser, causing the void to tremble. The black longbow in his hand was flowing with splendor, as though it would break through its limit in the next moment. Buzz, the black arrow seemed to have turned into a long river as it streaked across the sky, heading straight for Hades' era. "What kind of Tom, Dick, or Harry is blocking my path? Scram!" Yencheng shouted with a dignified and imposing appearance. The voice was like thunder, exploding on the second floor of the Jade Scale restaurant. Hades' era's laughter abruptly stopped as he looked at Yen Yu in disbelief. What did he just say? What did he say? I am a Tom, Dick or dog. How is this prince like that lazy mangy dog? That young man wasn't good-looking, but his brain was damaged. It seemed he needed to wake up. Hades' era covered half of his face with one hand, revealing the other half of his face, revealing a devilish smile. Then, he glared at Yenyu. There seemed to be energy flowing in his eyes, causing the arrow that was shooting towards him to stop in mid-air. That black arrow spun unceasingly, as though it wanted to drill a deep hole in the air. Nether King Ha opened his mouth, gently blowing a breath. Instantly, the black arrow shot back, hitting the arrows behind it. Ding! 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 The sound of arrows colliding resounded. Every single arrow was blown away, causing sparks to fly out. You have some ability. But do you think it's over? Yencheng squinted when he saw Hades's move. He exhaled like a dragon, and the true energy in his body surged. He raised one hand, and a rumbling sound reverberated in the void. He twisted his hand. Yencheng's eyes bloomed with a sharp light. The arrows, which had been bounced back, spun in the air. A moment later, they turned around and aimed at Hades' era. Countless black arrows appeared in the void, aiming at Nether King Ha. The hair-raising feeling made Lu Jelly, who was standing in the distance, feel as though he had fallen into an ice cave. His eyes were filled with disbelief. He could clearly sense the terrifying might contained within each arrow. One arrow was enough to pierce through him, and he couldn't resist at all. Needless to say, there were so many of them. Without a doubt, Great Elder Chu Chongqing had died under this move. His body was riddled with bloody holes because of those black arrows. Too frightening! Too frightening! That fellow! Who was he after all? His eyes were filled with fear as he turned to look at Bufang. With a single glance, he calmed down. That was because Bufang was too calm. He didn't seem to be flustered at all. He closed his eyes one more time, and his mental force swept out. The bubbling sound of the black turtle constellation walk resounded. Thick spirit energy and aroma began to linger. It was the aroma of the Taotia's heart being cooked. That meaty aroma was so thick that people couldn't help but indulge in it. It was as though the aroma had spread for 10 miles, and the entire Glutton God City's long street was covered in this aroma. Emolyuji drank the wine from his bamboo flask, smelling the meaty aroma in the air. His face couldn't help but reveal a happy expression. Drinking the wine and smelling the aroma. So comfortable. Of course, Yanqing also smelled the aroma of the Taotia's heart, and his eyes turned ferocious. He couldn't drag it out any longer. He had to finish this battle quickly. If he delayed any longer, the Taotia's heart would be cooked. His mind flickered and the black arrows in the void buzzed. Swish! One by one, the arrows tore through the sky, flying toward Hades' era. Swish! 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 Everybody screamed in fear. They realized that the handsome young man couldn't dodge the black arrows, and they pierced him one after another. In just a blink of an eye, the young man's body twisted, and he looked like a porcupine with countless spikes. His aura seemed to disappear in just a blink of an eye. Trash indeed. The corners of Yanqing's mouth curled into a cold smile, and his eyes were filled with disdain. He thought that guy was really strong, but he couldn't even block one of his moves. So boring, Yanqing said. His cultivation base had reached the half-step divine spirit realm. Although this cultivation base wasn't considered the peak in the hidden dragon royal court, he didn't have many opponents. He could be said to be the #1 expert under the sect master. Any almighty expert was just an ant in his hands. He could kill and suppress them with a flip of his hand. Xiaoya looked at the scene worriedly. She hugged Hua's serpentine body tightly. Hua's triflower snake eyes moved, and he slightly lowered his head. He stuck out his tongue, licking Xiaoya's head. Yu leaned against the wall, crossing her long legs. She didn't seem worried at all. After all, he was Hades. If he could be dealt with so easily, what was the point of keeping Hades alive? All of a sudden Yanqing's eyes moved. Because he realized that the body that had been pierced like a hedgehog suddenly moved. Ding! 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 One by one, the black arrows fell to the ground, emitting a crisp sound. However, the sound disappeared shortly after. An unharmed figure stood at his original spot. The figure tilted its head, and there was a black arrow in its mouth. Hades' era looked at Yanqing indifferently. He gently spat, and the arrow fell on the ground. You young man! You're really hot-tempered. I can't believe you wanted to turn I into a porcupine. To people with bad intentions like you, I usually deal with them with one punch, Hades' era said. After saying that, his body disappeared. A moment later, he reappeared in front of Yanqing. Boom! A heavy punch landed on Yanqing's abdomen. Yanqing arched his back. His eyes widened in disbelief, as if his eyeballs were about to pop out. However, Bufang young man said that he would spare your life. Based on I's professional ethics, I will reluctantly give you a few more punches. Yanqing's face turned purplish red. Clutching his abdomen, he took a few steps back and sat on the ground. He was panting heavily, and his eyes were filled with fear. Yanqing gritted his teeth and lifted his head. His eyes were about to spurt fire. However, as soon as he lifted his head, his eyes shrank. That was because a finger was placed between his eyebrows. The finger flicked. A terrifying force blossomed and exploded from the space between his brows. Boom! Yanqing directly slid down from the second floor, his buttocks rubbing against the stairs. Humiliation. Humiliation. At this moment, Yancheng completely exploded. He leaped up, roaring angrily. He placed a black bow in his hand and quickly pulled it. A jade talisman around him exploded. Die! The jade talisman exploded, and the energy inside quickly condensed into an arrow on the black bow. The arrowhead of the arrow bloomed with a golden radiance, as if a spiral energy was spinning around it. Swoosh! As the arrow whistled out, the void seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. The might of the arrow was extremely terrifying and horrifying. Die! 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 Yancheng was enraged. He had never suffered such humiliation before. As the great commander of the ancient Jade Holy Land, even if he went to the other Holy Lands, he would receive a grand welcome. However, at this moment, someone had slapped him until his buttocks were scraping against the stairs. Hades' Era covered his face with one hand, snorting coldly. He raised his hand, spreading his fingers. Immediately, he caught the light arrow. Sizzle! Sizzle! The light arrow struggled as if it wanted to break free from Hades's restraint. Nether King Ha exerted some force in his hand, and the light arrow was instantly crushed. In the next instant, Nether King Ha stomped his foot, causing the ground on the second floor to shake. Era appeared in front of Yancheng. Their faces were less than an inch apart. Yancheng's eyes bulged. Boom! Hades' Era didn't say anything. He punched Yancheng's stomach one more time. Yancheng's mouth was round, and he almost vomited his bile. What was going on? Why was he punching the same spot again? I hate it when people shoot me with arrows. It's annoying. If we can solve it with our fists, we shouldn't use those thin things. Boom! Hades' Era grinned. Then, he punched again, hitting the same spot. Yancheng felt as if his internal organs were about to shift positions. He was AF** King Almighty Expert at the half-step Divine Spirit realm. His body was strong, so he almost vomited his bile after 2 punches. Far from them, Bufang's long hair fluttered in the wind, and his tightly closed eyes gradually opened. His vermilion robe flapped noisily as he rose to his feet. He placed one hand on the black turtle constellation walk, and the other hand patted it. There was a loud thud. Instantly, the sound of a heartbeat arose. The thick aroma of meat filled the air, and a scarlet heart slowly rose from the black turtle constellation walk. The heart was so hot that it made people suck in a breath of cold air. One by one, the ingredients flew out. Bufang shoved them into the Taoye's heart. Then, he put the Taoye's heart into the black turtle constellation walk. Shortly, the Taoye's heart was absorbed by the Taoye's heart at a speed visible to the naked eye. Everybody held their breaths. They felt something strange happen around the black turtle constellation walk. Tens of thousands of flowers bloomed, and the evening drum and morning bell rang. A spirit beast phantom roared in the sky. The elixir cuisine was done. Chapter 796. The heartbeat reverberated throughout the entire Valley of Gluttony. At this moment, everyone couldn't help but lift their heads. They stopped what they were doing and looked in the direction of the Jade Scale restaurant. Over there, everyone saw brilliant multicolored light and flowers blooming all over the ground. The surging heartbeat reverberated in everyone's ears, causing their blood to boil. It was as though their blood was about to burst out of their skin. Their hearts started to race along with the surging heartbeat. Some of them sat cross-legged, breathing out spiritual energy. It should be an extremely high-grade dish. The people in the Valley of Gluttony had never seen such a phenomenon before. Many of them knelt on the spot, looking in the direction of the phenomenon. They rubbed their palms and kowtowed, their faces filled with sincerity. Emolyoji, who was sitting on the tree, trembled. He almost fell from the tree. His eyes widened, and the bamboo flask of wine in his hand fell to the ground. However, he didn't feel the slightest bit of heartache. A dish could create such a phenomenon? There was such a thing. It was worthy of being called the Taotia's heart. It was indeed a good item. No wonder it could revive people, grow flesh and bones, and ignite the divine flame of an almighty half-step divine soul realm expert. Just this heaven and earth phenomenon alone was enough to make people tremble and greedy. Ring, ring. Everybody was stunned, looking at the Jade Scale restaurant. At this moment, the entire Jade Scale restaurant seemed to become dazzling. Countless beams of light shot out from the restaurant, shooting up to the sky. It seemed as though they wanted to scatter the clouds in the sky. The aroma seemed to turn into a thick mist, lingering around, turning the surroundings into a fairyland. The sound of a copper bell swayed and resounded in the air, lingering in people's ears. It was as though a peerless piece of music was being played. In the air, flowers of energy were blooming. Every time they bloomed, the light became more dazzling and beautiful. Petals fell from those blooming flowers, lingering around the entire Jade Scale restaurant, attracting everyone's attention. Flowers bloomed in the air, and a beautiful melody lingered. A dish could actually manifest a strange phenomenon. How could such a thing actually happen? Roar. Among the blooming flowers in the air, a bestial roar reverberated. In the next moment, everyone's eyes flashed. A violent spirit beast lifted its head from the strange phenomenon, opened its mouth, and let out a furious roar. That roar went straight to the heavens, directly roaring. Everyone was shocked. The pressure from the firmament was heavy, and this spiritual beast actually dared to roar at the firmament. Its guts were not small. Lu Jieli's legs trembled. He was really frightened. He had never thought that Bufang would be able to tinker with such a thing. He had read a lot of books and was very knowledgeable about many things. Therefore, he was very clear about what the phenomenon meant. This signified the maturation of a peerless divine medicine. Once a genuine peerless divine herb matured, a phenomenon would appear to withstand the might of the world. No matter how many books Lu Jieli, read, he couldn't figure out how cooking could produce the effects of a divine herb's maturity. But there was no doubt that Bufang's dish would have the effect of a miraculous medicine. Otherwise, there would be no reason for the phenomenon to appear. In fact, the phenomenon this time was already considered very small. When a truly precious divine herb matured, the phenomenon could cover an area of several hundred miles, allowing the entire region to see it clearly. Moreover, lightning punishment would descend from the heavens, using this to refine the matured divine medicine, making the medicinal effects even more potent. However, although the phenomenon this time didn't reach that level, it was enough to shock the world. Bufang stood up. He was in the strange phenomenon, where hundreds of flowers bloomed, and a glass-like radiance shuttled around his body. That warm feeling made him feel refreshed, as if he was bathing in the baptism of the world's energy. His body hungrily absorbed the energy within the phenomenon, causing his figure to blossom with a dazzling radiance. His body was becoming stronger rapidly. Today, Bufang's body had already broken through the limit of the divine physique echelon, and it was much stronger than ordinary divine soul echelon experts. His divine physique echelon foundation was really strong. The system strengthened his cultivation, but it only strengthened his true energy cultivation. At most, it could increase Bufang's body to the level corresponding to his realm. However, Bufang could strengthen his body by himself. Although it was very difficult to strengthen his body, it was also a path that Bufang could take. Bufang's eyes were bright, and his heart was filled with excitement. He let out a long roar, and his mental force was completely boiling. In his spirit sea, a golden divine dragon was surging, and its eyes shot out beams of dazzling light, as if it wanted to tear everything apart. The dragon's roar resounded unceasingly. Bufang stood under the dragon's might, his face unchanging. In the spiritual sea, he was like a thin boat that could be overturned by the waves at any time. However, he withstood it, looking down on the divine dragon. After a long time, the spirit sea regained its calm, and the golden divine dragon's eyes were bright as it quieted down. At this moment, the connection between Bufang and the Tool Spirit Golden Dragon seemed to be closer. Bufang gently exhaled. His mind returned to his body. Opening his eyes, his mouth seemed to let out a dragon's roar. The black, unadorned golden dragon bone kitchen knife completely lost its black color and became dazzling gold. The Tool Spirit had awakened. From now on, the golden dragon bone kitchen knife was no longer covered in dust. Bufang held the golden dragon bone kitchen knife horizontally. The back of the knife had a ferocious dragon bone. The knife looked like it was made of gold, and it could reflect a person's face. The handle of the knife had a dragon's body. The dragon opened its mouth, spitting out the knife. Bufang's index finger pressed on the back of the knife. Holding the golden dragon bone kitchen knife, his eyes were blurry. His hand moved, and instantly, the golden knife light was dazzling. The knife light bloomed, and the void trembled. In front of Bufang, a giant heart was beating. Thump, thump. A thick meaty fragrance and spirit energy spread out. The heart was covered with ferocious silver patterns, as though it was trying to break free from its shackles and break through the void. You want to overturn the heavens with just one dish? Bufang held the golden dragon bone kitchen knife, his eyes shining. Then, he pointed the knife at the beating Taoya's heart and said expressionlessly, "Thump, thump." The sound of the heartbeat was deafening, as though it was about to shatter the void. In the next instant, Bufang stepped on the ground, and the golden dragon bone kitchen knife slashed at the giant Taoya's heart. Roar! Within the heart, a shadow appeared, roaring at Bufang with a ferocious gaze. You dare? The beast's roar became real, and it seemed to resound from the 9 heavens. At this moment, the sky changed. The day turned into night, and dark clouds covered the sky. Bufang's eyes focused, and he held the golden dragon bone kitchen knife tightly. His face did not change, and he directly slashed down without listening to the roar. Swish! The revived golden dragon bone kitchen knife seemed to have become the sharpest knife in the world. The knife slashed down. The Taoya's heart could not resist at all, and the shadow was cut into 2. The unwilling roar in the sky gradually dissipated, and the sun shone down. The Taoya's heart slowly split into 2 halves, and a blue and white porcelain bowl appeared in Bufang's hand. The bowl flew out, and under the control of Bufang's mental energy, it caught a drop of pink liquid from the split Taoya's heart. That drop of pink liquid dripped into the bowl. The Taoya's heart stopped beating, and it was caught by Bufang. The silver liquid completely covered the Taoya's heart. This was the real elixir cuisine. Taoya's heart soup. The will of the Taotai, which had been hiding in the Taoya's heart, was cut into pieces by Bufang's golden dragon bone kitchen knife. After the revival, the golden dragon bone kitchen knife seemed to have become a part of the god of cooking set. It could cut the sky, cut the earth, and cut the air. However, after just one slash, Bufang felt that his true energy had been completely exhausted. Indeed, his cultivation was too low. Inside the Taotai restaurant, Lord Go's nose twitched. Then, he lifted his head, looking in the direction of the Jade Scale restaurant. The previous sound that came from the 9 heavens made Lord Go's dog mouth twitch. It seemed to be a little disdainful. After that, Lord Go turned his body, continuing to snore. The golden dragon bone kitchen knife turned into gold light and scattered. Bufang felt a little tired. His spirit sea had calmed down, and it had expanded a lot. However, Bufang was so tired that he did not want to move. Although he was tired, his face did not show it. He was still calm and collected. He held the Taoya's heart in one hand, and the other hand was holding the pink liquid soup. Looking at the shy Xiaoya in the distance, he raised his chin. "Xiaoya, come here and feed this to Chu Chongqing," Bufang said calmly. Xiaoya was bewildered. Then, she ran over eagerly. Chu Chongqing was bound tightly by the black and white Taoya's bandages. That wisp of vitality was also sealed in his body. If that wisp of vitality vanished, there would be no medicine to save him. Bufang had no way to save him. Xiao Ye held the Taoye's heart, walking in front of Chu Chongqing. In the distance, Yan Cheng was so angry that his eyes looked like they were about to pop out of their sockets. He dashed to the second floor. How could he waste the Taoye's heart to an ant? This kind of act of wasting natural resources would be punished by lightning. Bufang looked at the crazy Yan Cheng, furrowing his brows. Swoosh! Hades' figure appeared out of thin air. He looked at Bufang awkwardly and said, "I'm sorry. I didn't say anything and let this fellow come up. I'll send him down now." Boom! Hades' punched. Instantly, it hit Yan Cheng's stomach. Yan Cheng's eyes widened. They were bloodshot as he looked at Hades' Why did you hit the same spot? Rumble. Yan Cheng rolled down the stairs one more time. At this moment, he finally knew who the handsome fellow in front of him was. The Holy Saint's clone must have been torn by this fellow. He had released a wisp of nether energy, which gave him goosebumps all over his body. This was a powerful netherworld creature. Great Commander! Yan Cheng's subordinates roared in anger. They angrily glared at Nether King Erha. Their auras condensed, as if they had turned into a terrifying torrent. The ancient Jade Holy Land couldn't be humiliated. The eyes of the guards bloomed with radiance. In the next moment, jade talismans floated around their bodies. However, just as they were about to burst out their power on the second floor, an even more torrential aura burst out. Yan Cheng's eyes shrank. He clutched his stomach, his face disbelieving as he lifted his head to look at the second floor. That familiar aura, it was Chu Chongqing. Chu Chongqing was alive? Xiao Ye carefully fed the Taoye's heart to Chu Chongqing. Then, she poured the bowl of pink soup that Bufang had given her into Chu Chongqing's mouth. Under the control of the black and white bandages, Chu Chongqing could open and close his mouth freely, which saved him a lot of trouble. Everything was done after they finished eating. Chu Chongqing's chest emitted a dazzling radiance. Bufang clasped his hands behind his back. His hair cascaded as he indifferently looked at Chu Chongqing, who was floating in the void. The bandages on the black and white taotais began to unravel. Chu Chongqing's heart began to change. A powerful aura diffused from Chu Chongqing's body. Bufang took a deep breath, then exhaled. The next moment, he said indifferently, "Today I used the Taoye's heart to save your life. From now on, you are no longer the great elder of the Valley of Gluttony, but a waiter of my Taotai restaurant. You will use your entire life to repay this meal. Whether you agree or not, you have no right to reject." Chapter 797. Bufang's voice was very calm, and it wasn't very loud. However, everyone was completely stunned by what he said. Lu Jelly shivered. His eyes widened, looking at Bufang in disbelief. What the F***ck did he just hear? Bufang wanted to take the Great Elder as a waiter? This. That's too crazy. The Great Elder was the supreme existence of the Valley of Gluttony. He was the pillar of the Valley of Gluttony. How could he become a waiter in a restaurant? Buzz, the bandage spread out and gradually revealed a figure under the bandage. That figure hovered in the air, gradually becoming visible. The projection array formation reflected this scene. Everybody outside the Jade Scale restaurant was thrilled. It was the Great Elder. The Great Elder was alive again. The bloody holes on Chu Chongqing's body began to heal at a speed that naked eyes could observe. His flesh wiggled, and the bloody holes were filled. Vitality surged from his body, turning into a long dragon that wound around his body. Chu Chongqing roared, and his aura reached its peak. He slowly opened his eyes, and there was a dazzling light in his eyes. Chu Chongqing looked at Bufang. Bufang looked at him indifferently. Of course, Chu Chongqing heard Bufang's words. He was hesitant. He was hesitating from now on. He wasn't the Valley of Gluttony's great elder anymore? Chu Changxing's eyes were a little bewildered. The heavy shackles on his shoulders were going to be removed today? Chu Changxing kept silent. He couldn't answer Bufang quickly. He could feel his heart beating powerfully in his chest. Every single beat would send surging energy to the surroundings of his body, nourishing his body and making it stronger. Chu Changxing had never experienced such a powerful feeling before. This feeling is really enjoyable. Chu Changxing raised his hands. The bandages hung on his body, and he lifted them up. He looked at his hands and sighed. Chu Changxing's face became younger. His wrinkles were wiped away, and he looked like a handsome young man. The young man's face was as sharp as a knife, his nose was straight like a hook, his eyebrows were like swords, and his eyes were like stars. He was so handsome that many people fell into a trance. The young Chu Changxing had returned. However, Chu Changxing's white hair was still white, but each strand was crystal clear, filled with energy. Stroking his beard, Chu Changxing's eyes shot out beams of light. "You don't have the right to refuse," Bufang said indifferently with his hands behind his back. His words left no room for doubt. Chu Changxing was a little bewildered. Was that still the little chef he knew? Since when did he possess such a powerful aura? Chu Changxing wouldn't refuse, and neither could he. He had already tasted death, and he did not want to die again. The shackles of the Valley of Gluttony belonged to the dead Chu Changxing. Today, the new Chu Changxing was a waiter of the Taotai restaurant. It was that simple. "I promise you, from today onwards, I'm a waiter. I'm no longer the great elder of the Valley of Gluttony," Chu Changxing said calmly. Chu Changxing said calmly. His face was calm, and his eyes didn't have any flicker. There was only indifference and sincerity. After carrying the heavy shackles of the Valley of Gluttony for so many years, he was a little tired. If he was tired, he should let it go. Good. The corners of Bufang's mouth rose. A moment later, he raised his right hand. Buzz, the black and white bandages on Chu Changxing's body returned, winding around Bufang's arm and covering his black and white skin. "Thank you, Owner Bu, for saving my life. A bowl of Taotai soup, a lifetime of Chu Changxing." Chu Changxing grabbed his beard. A moment later, true energy gushed out from his fingertip, slicing it. His white beard fluttered in the air. After cutting his beard, Chu Changxing looked even more handsome. His smooth chin and gloomy eyes made people's hearts beat faster. However, what shocked the people of the Valley of Gluttony more was that Chu Changxing had agreed to Bufang's request. The great elder had become a waiter in a restaurant. Oh my God! After this, the entire Valley of Gluttony, no, the entire royal court's Holy Land was shaken. If the other Holy Lands knew this news, they would become restless. His. Many people's expressions changed. Chu Changxing's body slowly landed on the ground. He bowed to Bufang respectfully. A moment later, he straightened his body, turned around and walked down the stairs. He took one step. Chu Changxing's aura surged torrentially. His soul ladder emerged above his head, and the 8-step soul ladder emerged. After taking the second step, another step appeared on the 8-step soul ladder. The 9-step soul ladder was formed. However, it wasn't the end. With each step Chu Changxing took, his aura skyrocketed. Shortly after, an exquisite divine altar was created on the 9-step soul ladder. The divine altar bloomed with dazzling light, which was so dazzling. His chest bloomed with light. His heartbeat was deafening. The Taoya's heart seemed to fuse with Chu Changxing. Standing on the staircase of the second floor, Chu Changxing indifferently looked down. His eyes were like lightning as he gazed at Yanqing, who had straightened his body. Yanqing felt as though he was going to vomit his bile. He looked at Hades' Era, who was playing with his fingers not far from him, with a frightened face. "Little Ha, go upstairs. Let them settle their grudges themselves." Bufang's faint voice floated down from the second floor. Hades' eyes brightened. The corners of his mouth curled into a devilish smile as he looked at Yanqing. The latter clutched his stomach in fear, his face shivering. A moment later, Hades sprinted up the stairs. When he passed by Chu Chongqing, Hades arched his brows, looking at him suspiciously. Not bad. You can kill him now. I left this for you. If you can't kill him, you'll lose face. Hades' smiled. Then, he walked past Chu Chongqing to stand next to Bufang. He rubbed his hands, his face expectant. Chu Chongqing's eyes moved, falling on Yanqing. The divine altar above his head bloomed with radiance. The Taoye's heart directly pushed his cultivation base to the peak of the almighty realm, half a step into the divine spirit realm. Although he hadn't ignited his divine flame yet, with the Taoye's heart in his chest, he would ignite it sooner or later and become a sect master. However, even if he could become a sect master, he knew that he could only be a waiter. However, before that, he had to settle some grudges. Since Owner Bu left you for me to deal with, I can't disappoint Owner Bu in my first appearance. Chu Chongqing walked down the stairs step by step. With a single step, the staircase immediately crumbled, turning into fragments that fluttered everywhere. However, Chu Chongqing's body continued to descend steadily as if he was walking on the stairs. Shortly after, he reached the first floor. Yanqing straightened his body, wiping a drop of blood from the corner of his mouth. His eyes became sharp. You think you're invincible after being reborn? You've just condensed your divine altar. What right do you have to shout in front of me? Yanqing said coldly. He slowly held the black longbow in his hand and propped it on his arm. If I can kill you once, I can kill you again. I'm not the great elder of the Valley of Gluttony anymore, but we still need to settle the grudge between us. His handsome face reflected the light, causing many people to fall into a trance. Indeed, he wasn't their great elder anymore. Emoluji watched the scene from a distance. He couldn't help but drop his jaw. He had never thought that the Taoye's heart would be so powerful. No. It should be said that after being cooked by Bufang, the effect of the Taoye's heart was even more terrifying. Originally, the Taoye's heart could only ensure that Chu Chongqing wouldn't die. However, it was too difficult to make him return to his youth and increase his fighting power. Emoluji looked at Chu Chongqing, who was dozens of years younger than him. Looking at the young Chu Chongqing, who was even more handsome than him, the corners of his mouth twitched. The star compass appeared in his hand. His mind flickered and he began to deduce. He had a feeling that Chu Chongqing's fate had changed greatly at this moment. All of a sudden, the star compass shook, and tens of thousands of starlight shot out from it. Emoluji was dumbstruck. Blood spurted from his nostrils, and he fell from the tree, landing head first on the ground. It had once again exceeded the scope of his deduction, too terrifying. This Bufang was worthy of being the saintess inner demon. It seemed he couldn't bring him back. Emoluji rubbed his bleeding nose, getting up from the ground. He looked at Bufang with a complicated expression, then leaned against the tree. He planned to return to the heavenly secret Holy Land after watching this show. He needed to tell Granny Mo about Bufang. He couldn't bring the saintess inner demon back. He didn't have a solution. He was desperate. He couldn't beat him, and he couldn't trick him. If he stayed here any longer, Emoluji was afraid that he would sink into this place. There were too many temptations here, and there were so many delicious foods. It was like heaven. Boom. Waves of air rolled and expanded in the Jade Scale restaurant. In front of Yanqing, the guards released their auras, their eyes sharp. Chu Chongqing clasped his hands, slowly walking forward. Chu Chongqing clasped his hands, slowly walking forward. With each step he took, the ground shook. Open the heaven lock formation. Kill Chu Chongqing. Yanqing rubbed his belly. After calming himself down, he roared. His eyes were as sharp as a sword, gazing at Chu Chongqing. At the entrance to the second floor, Bufang and the others were all standing on it, looking down at the battle below. Yancheng raised his head and stared at Bufang. His face was full of malice. Owner Bu! Damn Owner Bu! Kill! Heaven lock formation, rise! The guards stepped forward as if they were in a dream. A moment later, a phantom emerged above each of their heads. The phantom congregated, turning into the phantom of a giant demonic god. The illusory figure was holding a clanking, ice-cold, pitch-black chain in its hands. The demonic god rolled its eyes, glaring at Chu Chongqing. A moment later, the guards roared and charged. A terrifying gust of wind blew over, making Chu Chongqing's hair flutter. Chu Chongqing's eyes were indifferent. He clasped his hands, his face still emotionless. The radiance of his divine altar became more dazzling. Rattle! The chains swept out, sweeping horizontally across the entire floor, causing the walls on the first floor to crack. It aimed directly at Chu Chongqing. Boom! A fierce explosion echoed. Everything seemed to have become silent at this moment. The guards were dumbstruck for a while. A moment later, they all took in a breath of cold air. That was because Chu Chongqing had raised his hand, grabbing the cold, black chain. His handsome face slowly rose and his chin arched. Rumble! Rumble! Then, as everybody's eyes shrank, Chu Chongqing's arm, which was grabbing the chain, suddenly transformed. Shortly after, it became extremely huge. His terrifying muscles bulged, making him look like a boulder. As he exerted his strength, the chain was crushed. His fist, which had bulged out of shape, blasted toward the phantom. Chapter 798. Chu Chongqing's bulging muscles made his body look strange at this moment. His appearance seemed to have changed a little. His bulging muscles caused his skin to become glossy and shiny. In an instant, his skin color had turned from its original fair white to a reddish-brown color. The giant Demogorgon phantom's chain swept over, but Chu Chongqing's bulging fist caught it. Chu Chongqing's face was indifferent. His white hair cascaded and a faint, cold smile appeared on his handsome young face. His eyelashes trembled, and he gently exhaled. Boom! He exerted strength in his fist and squeezed down, instantly shattering the chain. Chu Chongqing's eyes were bright. Above his head, the 9 steps of the soul ladder glowed, and a divine altar hovered, emitting energy. He stomped on the ground, and instantly the ground exploded, sending rocks everywhere. Chu Chongqing swung his giant fist, and in just a blink of an eye, it seemed to break space. The eyes of all the guards shrank. His eyes were filled with fear as he looked at the giant. Chu Chongqing's eyes were filled with murderous aura. These people had come to humiliate the Valley of Gluttony's holy land. After today, he, Chu Chongqing, would no longer be the great elder of the Valley of Gluttony. Thus, what he could do now was to clear some obstacles for the Valley of Gluttony. Those who were a threat to the Valley of Gluttony had to die. Chu Chongqing roared angrily. His silver-white hair stood up as if it wanted to pierce the sky. His roar shook the entire world. Rumble! Rumble! Chu Chongqing's other arm bulged and his muscles moved. In just a blink of an eye, his arm became bigger. His muscles were as firm as a rock. His skin glowed, turning into a reddish-brown color. The Demogorgon opened its mouth and roared. The chain was crushed, and the armored Demogorgon drew an energy sword from his waist, slashing at Chu Chongqing. The energy sword whistled as it tore through the air, emitting a rustling sound. It was as if it was going to shatter at any moment. Boom! Chu Chongqing raised his hand, single-handedly catching the long sword. His eyes shone brightly, and his mouth split open as he let out a furious roar. Immediately, he exerted more strength in his arm, and the long sword was once again covered in cracks. Yan Cheng's eyes widened. How could Chu Chongqing's body become so strong? That was the ancient Jade Holy Land's secret technique that had transformed into a demonic god. It was an existence that could almost dominate the almighty realm. However, the Demogorgon seemed to be subdued by Chu Changsheng. Yan Qing's face grimaced. He didn't believe that the Taotia's heart could save Chu Changsheng. Moreover, it could increase Chu Changsheng's fighting prowess to such a terrifying level. Could it be that there were no side effects? How could such a superficial increase be a match for him? Kill him! Yan Qing shouted. Yes! The guards put away their shock and roared. The 4 talismans around each of them burst open one after another. Buzz, dense energy once again filled the demon god, causing it to become even more solid. The energy longsword, which was about to shatter, was restored once again. Chu Changsheng's silver hair fluttered like long swords tearing the void. His nostrils fumed with a dragon-like aura. A moment later, his upper body began to swell. Terrifying muscles covered Chu Changsheng's body. Chu Changsheng's body suddenly grew, turning into a 2-meter-tall giant. That giant's head still had Chu Changsheng's handsome face, and his lower body was still that of a teenager. It looked a little strange, and it made people feel strange. What kind of monster had the Great Elder turned into? Everybody's mind shivered. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Boom, boom, boom. Chu Changsheng, who was swelling up, became even more violent. He exerted strength in his arm that was gripping the longsword. His figure suddenly accelerated in the air and pressed the energy longsword against the demon god's body. Swoosh! The giant Demogorgon was directly cut into 2 halves by his own energy sword. Countless beams of energy gushed out. Boom! Boom! Inside the Jade Scale restaurant, sand and pebbles flew everywhere. The building was shaking and the roof was blown off. Lu Jelly felt his heart ache. His mouth twitched, but he was more frightened than anything else. Bufang and the others stood on the 2nd floor, watching indifferently. Although the 2nd floor was about to collapse, boom! The Demogorgon shattered, turning into tens of thousands of wisps of energy, scattering. Then, Chu Changsheng landed on the ground. The ground trembled as if a berserk beast had fallen from the sky. Many of the guards' faces stiffened. Kill him! The guards roared, holding their swords as they dashed over. However, after a few steps, the other guards began to run away, their faces filled with fear. They had to run. If they didn't run, they would die. Chu Changsheng's upper body swelled up, turning into a savage beast. His giant arms swept across, and the guards exploded. Blood exploded, turning into minced meat that filled the sky. He had been blasted apart by a terrifying force. Chu Changsheng's handsome face was focused. He didn't have a single ripple, as if this massacre didn't affect him at all. A guard wielded a long spear and thrust it into the flesh of the guard's waist. Puff, puff. The long spear was minced into pieces. The guard shivered, his face frightened. Energy shot out from his body as he wanted to retreat. However, Chu Changsheng's swollen arm rose, pounding the guard. With a loud thud, the guard was ruthlessly smashed into the ground, sinking deep into the ground. A deep hole was created in the ground. On the 2nd floor, Lu Jelly gawked, dropping his jaw. Was that still the King Great Elder he knew? Not only him, but the others who knew the Great Elder also looked as if they had seen a ghost. This kind of power, this extremely savage fighting style, didn't have anything to do with the Great Elder they used to know. Bufang clasped his hands, letting the strong wind from the battle blow his hair. The vermilion robe on his body also fluttered. Seeing Chu Changsheng, who was as wild as a demon, his eyes glowed with a bright light. Chu Changsheng's heart was the Taotia's heart. Although it was broken, the will of the Taotai in the Taotia's heart had been smashed by his kitchen knife. What Chu Changsheng had inherited was the power of the Taotia's heart. He was afraid that as the power fused, Chu Changsheng would become even more savage. It was even possible that he would turn into a Taotai. However, no matter what, even if he turned into a real Taotai, Chu Chongqing was also a waiter in his restaurant. He couldn't betray him. Of course, Bufang believed that Chu Chongqing wouldn't betray him. Boom. Boom. The thick smell of blood diffused. The entire place had become a sea of blood. Hades Era clicked his tongue, looking at the hot-tempered Chu Chongqing. His eyes sparkled. Yu's eyes didn't waver. Xiaoya hugged Hua, who had returned to her human form. Her eyes were filled with fear. The current Grandpa Chu, he was so fierce and scary. Boom. Chu Chongqing lifted his head, standing at his spot. His silver hair fanned as he squinted, exhaling a long sigh. His body was covered in blood, which made him look even more savage. His bulging muscles made him look like a wild beast. Yan Cheng was completely bewildered. His eyes were dull as he watched Chu Chongqing smash all the guards into minced meat. His body couldn't help but shiver. He was so angry. Those were his personal guards, his subordinates. If they were all killed, Yan Cheng's power in the ancient Jade Holy Land would be greatly reduced. Yan Cheng's prestige in the Yan family would be reduced a lot. You really deserve to die. If I can kill you once, I can kill you a second time. Yan Cheng was enraged. He raised his black bow, and the symbols around his body exploded. A 9-step soul ladder emerged above his head, blooming dazzlingly. At the top of the soul ladder, there was a divine altar. A resplendent star shone on top of the divine altar, emitting streams of light. Those beams of light wound around Yan Cheng's body, making his aura skyrocket. Shortly after, he turned into a majestic mountain. Chu Chongqing slowly looked at Yan Cheng, the corners of his mouth curling. You killed me once. Now that I'm alive, if I let you kill me a second time, won't I lose face? So, this time, you're the one who will die. Chu Chongqing pounded his fists on the ground. His body shot up into the sky, and his lower body began to swell. His legs became bigger and his muscles bulged like dragons. Boom! Boom! Chu Chongqing's body suddenly turned into a 3-meter-tall giant. The bones on his back jutted out, looking ferocious and terrifying. Yan Cheng's body floated up. Under the star energy, he looked even more like an immortal. Chu Chongqing, you're a demon now. I, Yan Cheng, will kill the demon today. As soon as he finished speaking, the symbols around Yan Cheng's body exploded, shooting 7-colored radiance. Crack! 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 Beams of light wound around the black bow, which seemed to wake up in just a blink of an eye. The bow was densely covered in fiery red veins. The bow vibrated. Ancient jade god slaying bow. Slay the god and destroy the demon. Today you, Chu Chongqing, must die. Yan Yu said indifferently, as if he was an emotionless punisher from the 9 heavens. Buzz, Taotai restaurant. Xiao Bai's quiet body shook. A moment later, his gray eyes twinkled. Sharp, ferocious marks slowly emerged from his body. I've sensed the aura of the god-slaying weapon. Kill. Boom. Boom. The ground shook, and some leaves fell from the path understanding tree. The leaves fluttered and fell on Lord Go's nose, tickling Lord Go. He couldn't help but open his dog eyes to see Xiao Bai push the restaurant's doors open, squeezing his way out. This silly lump of iron. Can't you lower your voice when you walk? You're disturbing Lord Go's sleep. Lord Go yawned, turned around and continued to snore. The fat on his body shook rhythmically. Chu Chongqing's face changed. His handsome face became ferocious in just a blink of an eye. His back bulged, and blue veins bulged on his face, making him look extremely ferocious. His voice had also become hoarse, leaving behind only his head of silver hair that was still disheveled. Yan Cheng indifferently looked at Chu Chongqing, who seemed to have turned into a demon. His eyes had a disdainful gleam. He pulled his longbow, and the buzzing sound echoed everywhere. In the next moment, numerous fiery red arrows appeared on the longbow. God-slaying arrow. Die. Swoosh. 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 In just a blink of an eye, the wind and clouds changed color. The 3 arrows formed the shape of a triangle, shooting toward Chu Chongqing's huge, muscular monster. Yan Qing looked at Chu Chongqing, his eyes slowly becoming crazed. He was waiting to see Chu Chongqing's blood splatter in the sky one more time. All of a sudden his eyes narrowed. His pupils shrank in just a blink of an eye. That was because he found that Chu Chongqing's muscular monster's body slowly became blurry. The god-slaying arrow minced it into a blur. Boom! A moment later, Yan Qing's head felt dizzy. A big hand grabbed his head, forcefully pushing him to the ground from the void. The ground exploded instantly. Gravel flew everywhere. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.